I'm here to stand on my soapbox and proclaim that to the world.
On this show.
This is the hottest show on the planet right now.
What's the debate?
Ain't no debate.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're tuning into the Vulcan Soapbox, where we reason at the highest level and teach you how to learn critical thinking, give you avenues and tools to help you extrapolate ideas and the things that you observe. And I am saying, well, my guy, Vulcan, man. We're back, man. What's up, man?
What's going on, my people out there, all the Volks out there, Vulcans. And I want to take a little time to explain that part. Let me make sure this is live real quick so everybody can see it. And if you can take the time to go ahead and share it on your side too, when you get a chance. But everybody out there, so this is the Vulcan Soapbox. And I don't always break down what the show's title is about and what it means. And we have different generations, but there was a show back in the day, and there's movies out that are more recent in the 2000s called Star Trek. And in the show Star Trek, there was a race of aliens. Well, to us, they're aliens, and I guess to them, we were aliens. But their focus as a race was they were really focused on logic and reason. And they did not like to allow emotions to impact their decision making, especially with important things, but just in general. And so the Vulcan Soapbox is meant to be a platform. Soapbox, if you look at the dictionary, it's just a soapbox, just means it's a platform people use to be able to share important messages with the public. And so the Vulcan Soapbox is just us sharing logic and reason at the highest level that we could possibly do it in memory of the Vulcans. So I'm the Vulcan, got Enos right there, and that's what we do on the shows. We focus on logic and reason. And the reason is because being logical and being reasonable is about fairness, it's about intellectual integrity, it's about doing things that are going to be the best, communicating ideas that are the best suited for everybody. When we're being unreasonable or illogical, typically we do it partially in our favor, selfishly. We tend to confirm our own biases whenever we're not being reasonable and logical. And because of that, people may discredit you or dismiss you because of the fact that you're not coming across as somebody who you can't even reason with. So that being the case, this show is dedicated to that. So let's go ahead and get into the subject matter, which is David Banner. I've been seeing a lot of his videos popping up online, and so I thought it might be good to discuss some of the material that he covers. We're going to just do a point-by-point, play-by-play breakdown. A lot of us were big fans of his music growing up. Interestingly enough, I was talking to some young guy maybe like 6 months ago, and I happened to bring up David Banner's name, and they were like, "Who's that?" That's when I realized I was getting old. So yeah, we're going to be covering his material. David Banner, what in the HE double hockey sticks is he missisSippin on today? And we're going to talk about it right now. Let's get into it, All
right, let's get into it, man.
People tell me, David Banner, you don't talk about racism anymore. You only talk about white supremacy. I don't see a problem in racism anymore. Watch this. Race is the root word. Root is the root word. Ism and is the act of the word, right? So white people are supposed to take care of white people first. They're supposed to get themselves the Grammys first, the movies first, because don't lions take care of lions? Tigers take care of tigers. It's not white people's racism that's the problem. It's black people's lack of racism. We're supposed to be racist too, and we're not.
Is that the video right there we're going to be covering first? I can't hear you.
Yeah, that's the first video we cover. That's the first video David Banner is suggested and advocating that we should practice racism like white people practice racism.
So my initial thoughts, we can dive more into it, is when he says that he doesn't focus on racism. He focuses on what he said, white supremacy. Was that it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And so the thing is I'm going to cover that part second. I just wanted to deal with the analogy he gave, which I didn't like at all. And for all folks out there in the audience, I recognize that no analogy is going to be perfect. The whole point of an analogy is you're trying to compare like to like with things that aren't alike, because you're hoping that if somebody can find the principle in the one, they can find the principle in the other. and it's not always easy, and you're going to miss certain things, and you can always pick apart analogies. So this is not me attempting to nitpick his analogy in a deceptive way or a way that's not going to be intellectually stimulating. But I think that we got to think about the fact that when he says that lions take care of lions and bears take care of bears, those are different species. But in the human world, we are the part of the same species. So Hispanic, Black, whatever you want to call it, white, Caucasian, African, whatever you want to say, that's all the same species. That's why they're able to intermarry and interbreed. Bears and lions can't interbreed because they're different species. So the analogy to me is not a very intellectually rigorous example, or even intellectually honest, because it's not the same thing. Just because we're different hues does not mean that we're different species. And a lot of Black organizations, a lot of Black spiritual thought is that white people come from Blacks. So there's some, genetic evidence of that that some tend to promote. There's some people have religious texts, whether you go to the Nation of Islam and then believing that whites were made in the laboratory by a mad scientist, a Black mad scientist. So you have that. Then you also have people that just believe that, spiritually, Blacks were the first spiritually, and then whites came afterwards. So no matter what approach you take to it, genetically, spiritually, you're going to come to the same conclusion that if you believe that white people will come from Black people, then what are we talking about here? So it's your children, if you take it that way. It's your own kids. So, but that may be a little too deep for most people. We have to really get into that kind of a thing. And, that's why I say I don't believe in race. We're all the human race. Or you can say, some people say race is a social construct, and we can get more into that. But I would say what he's saying right there, that analogy just doesn't work. Any thoughts on those?
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point you're saying as far as us being the same species. Oh,
Yeah.
comparing the false analogy. And what stood out on the video when he said we should practice more racism, that's the part that I think we got to do a better job with the words we use, because racism means, practicing hatred. And if you're advocating for us to do that, that's the disagreement, the word he was using as far as how to define racism. So
yeah,
that stood out to me.
Absolutely right.
Job with that.
Yeah, so I think one thing that's interesting to me, when you look at the David Banner talking about, he says that we need to be more racist, we need to be more for ourselves. I do think that there's a sense in which you should do more for your community. I think that's pretty normal. If you go, when you take it from a more biological stance, that people tend to do things for their close family, their parents, their wife, their husband, their kids, and then as you extend it out, your desire to be responsible to them and to do for them tends to wane a little bit, which is natural. And I think a healthy society wants you to focus more on what's in your wheelhouse, which is your family, because you have a strong family. They have a strong family. You have strong families together. Protects everybody. So I think on a biological level, there's even some evidence that suggests that even your close friends may be as closely related to you as like a second or third cousin genetically. People tend to, there's studies that suggest that we tend to pick friends based off a close genetic proximity. I don't know how sturdy that research is and if that's going to stand the test of time, but has some stuff that's been suggested about that. So I think that is true that, people are going to want to do for those who are closest to them, because one, the reciprocity is there. You tend to gain more from that type of a thing. So you're getting, it's a transaction. A lot of relationships are transactional, and people are able to make that transaction that's in your favor more often. You're going to tend to do more things for them. That's just human nature. So I definitely get that part. Now, if you have a special love for people in a certain community, then you might do that stuff as well. Even if you're not out of that community, you take a Black dentist or a Black doctor who may move into a white suburb where he is, and he still wants to help out the local Black community if it's there. I don't see any problem with that. But if he wants to invest in his own community, regardless of what race that is, I think that's perfectly fine as well, because that's going to help him. That reciprocity, that altruism that he's displaying is going to come back to him to benefit him and his family and with his reputation.
Well, why do you think that when you say it as intellectual dishonesty, if somebody make a bad analogy, why do you consider that being intellectually dishonest?
Well, I don't think a bad analogy is intellectually dishonest.
Mhm.
I think when people purposely, go over or push to the side the lack of an analogous in the situation, the lack of an analogy, then they know they're doing that. And when that's happening, that's when you're being dishonest. If you know that their two are not analogous, you're pretending they are. The parallel, the pattern that you're trying to
Yeah,
establish
parallel.
isn't really there. And you use a deceptive thing like he's using, where he's talking about lions take care of lions, bears take care of bears, which harkens back to what we used to hear, back when with slavery, when the whites were saying, "Hey, look, no interracial relationships. The bears stay with the bears." And same for argument, isn't it? I mean, it sounds just the same. It was bad then, it's bad now.
Mhm.
So, and I think that a guy as sharp as him, even though he's from Mississippi, which is one of the states with the worst education. The state we went to had some pretty bad education too.
Yeah.
Mississippi I think is rated behind us where we were.
For sure. Yeah.
So I mean, that being the case, I don't expect this guy to always be the erudite, astute scholar that others may be that have a different background than him. But he's a sharp enough guy, a wise enough guy that he should know that that's not a good example. But it's convenient to use, and it's going to stir us up emotionally.
Yeah. Racially charged words.
Yeah. So I think in his case, there's good reason based off of how sharp he is, generally speaking, that he knows that wasn't really a good analogy. And that's part of my issue with a lot of these guys. Nobody presses them. Nobody's pressing these guys whenever they're making these points. So what happens is they're able to say these types of things and then move on to the next point. But it's on the internet forever.
Yeah, that's why it was a buzzword. He said we need to practice more racism. Like, judging the audience, that's not, I could see that having a bad ending or a bad interaction if you follow that advice. All right.
Exactly.
That's pretty good.
Was there any comments on that one, or we can move to the next one?
Yeah, we can move to the next one. No comments on this one.
Okay.
On that video. And play this next one and get your thoughts on this. Make sure, for our audience and viewers, make sure that you subscribe and like the video, please.
Like I might have missed one in the last video. Can we play that video again?
You want to play it again? Is that what you said?
I just want to make sure I covered everything.
Yeah, that's fine. If you want to add anything or while I pull that video up, feel free.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So one thing that's interesting about David Banner is after his rap career has declined, he's definitely picked up the mantle of activist for the community, which I can appreciate that, the altruism involved, to do that kind of a thing and the sacrifice it takes. But I don't know if you really get a whole lot of kudos when you're just spouting the same old tired rhetoric about, people out to get you and, white supremacy and all this other kind of stuff. People know that stuff's, out there. People know that there's people who don't like you because of your race and your color, your skin and stuff like that. But how empowering is that? One of the things that those of us who are in the world of business and sales and entrepreneurship, one thing you don't tell people that you want to overcome obstacles is all the different obstacles they got to overcome. One of the things that they would talk about with Custom Model with Mike Tyson was, Custom Model would make Mike Tyson feel like he was invincible. And so he would talk about, hey, you're the greatest thing ever. You're handsome. You're this, you're that. So I think part of it is just a recognition. And why do we got to tell people, about the boogeyman that's under the bed whenever that there's something you can do about that element of it. Whatever's there, whatever's left, you can't do anything about that. People that are successful didn't do something in regards to white supremacy or racism, whatever you want to call it, to be successful.
Okay.
But yeah, we can go into the video.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. I was just thinking because when you said it's best not to let people know the pitfalls, what do you say to people that say, Well, I just asked this where you just want to warn the person so they can be prepared for the pitfalls or the roadblocks that may be ahead of them.
I mean, are they telling this to kids or telling this to grown adults that already have jobs and already been through 12 years of school and stuff like that in high school? That'd be my
adult
question. Who are we talking to?
Talking to
I mean,
adults.
yeah, they're already adults. I mean, whatever racism or discrimination they're going to face, they've already faced whatever it is in that amount, and their families aren't telling them these things most of the time. We don't want to have them see things that aren't there. If they didn't see it already, then they don't see it. Then it's not their reality in their life. If you do the right things, you follow the right path, you're going to be successful. The path is pretty simple, but no matter what color skin you are. You got to do the right stuff, you'll be successful. Do the wrong stuff, you have a tougher road ahead of you.
Agree with that. Let's get into the video.
People tell me, David Banner, you don't talk about racism anymore. You only talk about white supremacy. I don't see a problem in racism anymore. Watch this. Race is the root word. Root is the root word. Ism and is the act of the word, right? So white people are supposed to take care of white people first. They're supposed to get themselves the Grammys first, the movies first, because don't lions take care of lions? Tigers take care of tigers. It's not white people's racism that's the problem. It's black people's lack of racism. We're supposed to be racist too, and we're not. People tell me.
All right.
Yeah, so hearing it again, saying racism is not the problem. This is just somebody trying to have another way, another angle. We always got to repackage the same old work to make it special. Somebody got blue magic. Some people got navy blue magic. Some people got, navy blue spells or, it's all just repackaging of the same stuff. The whole idea is that when it comes to racism, we all know it's a negative, just like sexism and racism and heightism, whatever kind of ism you have. There's no need to try to repackage it up. And then the question becomes, how far should we extend this idea? Should we have heightism? Should we have weightism? Would he say the same principles apply in those areas? Should people of a certain weight look out for each other? People of a certain height look out for each other? So people of a certain education look out for each other? Where does this start? Where does it end? Why is it only with racism should we have the tribal mentality as opposed to other types of isms? That's a question for the audience. That's a question for him as well. What makes one? Is that not special pleading to do it with one and not with the other? Is that not taxi cab fallacy? So that's what I want people out there in the audience to understand is how do you apply it in other areas? And if not, people go, oh, come on, man, you're being ridiculous. Of course not. Why? Give a cogent reason why that's not appealing to somebody's intuition or what you would consider somebody's common sense. Give a reason that we can think and ponder on ourselves that doesn't rely on assumptions that we may or may not even have. So that'd be my thought about that part right there, because I think they're saying that racism is not wrong. It's counter our intuitions, counterintuitive. And it's antithetical to the foundation that most of us want to establish in society. We're doing an experiment trying to take all these different people groups of different ethnicities and different cultures and bring them all together to form a more perfect union. Japan ain't got that problem. China ain't got that problem. India ain't got that problem. I don't think the answer is racism is okay.
You said that's an example of the special pleading fallacy? Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, special pleading, taxi cab. If he's going to claim that it's just with racism, should we be tribal and stick and just protect our own first? What happens when it comes to heightism or weightism or any other isms out there? Should people of a certain weight protect their own as opposed to others and go for them first? How does that work at a job interview? Are you saying that if we go to apply for a job, you're going to hire somebody because they're this or they're that first? Because what's going to happen is, because blacks only make up 12% of the population of America, between 11 and 13% you're going to see in there. So we don't even have the infrastructure to be able to support that type of thing in a way that's going to be advantageous to the broader community.
Yeah.
We already have fraternities that are doing their best at that kind of a thing. You already have universities that do that kind of a thing. There's already preferential treatment. Nepotism I've been a part of organizations where there was nepotism involved. Nobody likes it. So I just want everybody to think this all the way through. Run the simulation in your head. How many different types of categories or attributes of a person should they look for first in somebody else in order to make it some kind of decision that's going to benefit them? It never ends.
I'm gonna give a shout out to Nothing Without Jesus. Says it all leads to a type of favoritism.
That's facts. Absolutely right.
That's pretty good.
So yeah, you got anything on that? Or you good?
Yeah, I'm good on that.
All right, let's go.
Let's do this.
The first step is we got to find out our God. I honestly believe that. Like the most important thing to most Black people is God. And if God doesn't look like you, if that's just like a child who doesn't look like his dad, but his brother looks like his dad, he's always looking to his brother like, damn, I don't look like the person that I came from. I think it first starts with knowledge of self and us finding our own God. That's what I personally believe.
Okay.
And I honestly believe it's very hard for Jesus to hide in Egypt where where people were dark skinned if he wasn't dark skinned too. We'll leave that.
Okay.
We'll leave that for later. But and the skin is copper and hair wool. You know, that sounds more like
DB.
Yeah.
DB is Jesus.
Yeah. but I also think that's the first thing. Then I think that we must also.
All right.
Yeah, so that's another one. We didn't have a video for this one.
I'm sorry?
The video doesn't play for that one?
Does the video play for that one?
Yeah, just the audio.
Oh, yeah, that was the video. The video wasn't playing on your end?
Yeah, the video wasn't playing.
Oh, wow. Okay. I could play it.
That's my
again,
fault.
but-
I probably should have said something earlier.
Okay. Let me play it again. Let's see what happens.
All right.
Let's see. Here we go.
First of all, I
What's it doing
think
now?
the first
Yeah, it's
step
playing.
is we got to find out our God. I honestly believe that. Like the most important thing to most Black people is God. And if God doesn't look like you, if that's just like a child who doesn't look like his dad, but his brother looks like his dad, he's always looking to his brother like, damn, I don't look like the person that I came from. I think it first starts with knowledge of self and us finding our own God. That's what I personally believe.
Okay.
And I honestly believe it's very hard for Jesus to hide in Egypt where people were dark skinned if he wasn't dark skinned too. We'll leave that.
Okay.
We'll leave that for later. But and the skin is copper and hair wool. You know, that sounds more like
DB.
Yeah.
DB is Jesus.
Yeah. but I think that's the first thing. Then I think that we must also first.
All right. Yeah. So shout out to Nothing Without Jesus said favoritism equals unfairness equals inequality. Yes.
Yeah. The scripture will call it, the Bible will call it showing partiality. We are not to show partiality based off of riches, based off of color, any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you have anything on that? Want me to go ahead and get into it?
Yeah, I got a few things. My initial thoughts, we got to do a better job as a people where we just oversimplify us as a group of people. We need to do a better job acknowledging that there's a lot of diversity going on within our culture, within our ethnicity. So just because we have the same pigment doesn't mean we have the same ideas or morals of as far as who we worship and how we look at
Mhm.
God. You see this, you don't see this going on in Europe where you have France, Spain are right next to each other. Then you have Germany. Those are different cultures. They look at themselves different. And it's the same when you go to Africa. You see Nigeria next to Ghana. These are two different cultures, two different, have different religious views, morals, where are not the same thing. So in short, man, we got to do a better job acknowledging it is diversity within our ethnicity and our culture.
Definitely.
Mhm.
So a couple of things that I was trying to take notes on what he was saying, so we don't have to play the video more than once this time. But he talks about God should look like you.
Yeah.
Now, this poses a lot of problems for a lot of different spiritual traditions and religious traditions because we're told in the Bible that God is not a man that he should that he should lie, but the main part of that is that God is not a man, so God's not going to look like anybody. Obviously, the God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him, spirit and truth. So the idea of that God should look like you're already talking about some kind of man-made God. And this is really important. And him being from the South, being from Mississippi, he just like a lot of us Black people and people of other colors have been in the Christianese incubator, where we're told the stories as kids, we're told this, that, or the other. And a lot of the things that I noticed David Banner attacks about the Christianity or religion in general is like pop culture topics, pop culture thought process about religion. He's not really attacking theology itself or the doctrines themselves, but just what people may say. So, you see somebody, he might see Cupid fly by, a baby with wings, and goes, why would, you got this white baby flying around that's shooting people with arrows. We were the first ones to shoot arrows in Africa. They stole that from us. And you're like, okay, but there's no flying baby with wings in the actual Bible itself. That's more of a pop culture phenomenon. And so I see him do that a lot of times. And so one of them is just saying that God at least look like you. Which one comes first? God or the people? God comes first. So it wouldn't be, I need to find a God that looks like me. It's not like some kind of God buffet. We're going to get a little bit of this and get a little bit of that. That's not how it works. What kind of religion is that? That's definitely a man-made religion. That's a religion made in man's image. And you wouldn't really want that if you're going after truth. And I think that's part of the thing he's confusing, is just in his world, it's all just relative. So find a God that benefits you, and then that's the one you pick. I don't think I've ever ascribed a whole lot of value to God looking like me. But the God, even though God is spirit, you want to talk about the person of Jesus, who was God in the flesh. Even then, the Bible doesn't give any special significance to their skin color or who they are culturally or racially. There's no significance given to that. And people, they're called the chosen people, blah, blah, blah. So the significance of what was special was on the one that chose them, not on them being the ones that were chosen. So it's not that they were special, that's why they were chosen. Someone special chose them. So the emphasis on the person that chose them, which was God. So there's no reason to boast in any racial group that you identify with, whether Black, white, Hispanic, Hebrew, whatever one you want to pick. There's no real reason to boast. The Bible doesn't give you that reason to boast. So all of that stuff probably lends itself to why people want to say you got to find God and your image. Because you find God in your image, that's going to give you a sense of pride and purpose, and that you want to achieve great things and not look down upon yourself. But that's, to me, is just all backwards. It's antithetical to Christian doctrine specifically, because you should be there's nothing to boast in outside of Christ according to the scriptures. So your Blackness, your whiteness, whatever it is, that's not a significant reason to be boasting anyway. So I want to say that right there is backwards. I've heard Zoe Williams utter similar things.
Yes, yes.
Whatever the painter paints, the approver approver, something like he was talking about, where he's saying that you got to basically create your own God. Yeah. And that's definitely unbiblical to do so.
Thinks that the prover will prove, and he said that God is like a canvas. It's whatever you come up with that's your design
Yeah.
of God from your mind.
Yeah, yeah. Which another way I think he's saying is that we're God, or God's like a
Yeah,
figment of our
yeah.
imagination or something like that. And so he also said, child doesn't look like their dad. You know, a child wouldn't look like their dad. The reality is this: there's to me, there's at least two ideas here. There's one, a child looking like their dad, and then a child being able to perceive that you look like your dad. There are certain phenotypes, there are certain physical attributes about ourselves that you may not be able to recognize, especially if you're a child. You're not fully even developed human being. There's people who may not look like their parents until they're 13, 14 years old, and to the human observer.
Absolutely.
You know, so we got to get into our perceptions of looking like our parents. Some people, I don't think that would even really matter if you look like your parents. Maybe you might hope you look better than your parents. You know, some people might hope they're a little taller than their dad was, or whatever the case may be. But even if I were to grant what he's saying that you want to look like your dad or look like your mom or whatever the case may be, you know, you have a limited vantage point by which to look from. You're not, if you're especially not even trained at no one noticing features. How many parents debate who the kid looks like? We're not for sure about that whole thing. Especially, you know, your dad has a beard. You're looking at a smooth face, you know, 1-year-old. You know, you may not be able to detect whether that baby looks like the dad yet.
Mm-hmm.
So if a child were to come and say, "Look, I want to look like my dad, look like my dad," I would more so, let's break this down. Like, how do you know you don't look like your dad? Are you looking at your dad when he was your age? Looking at your dad now? You see what I'm saying? There's all these different questions. Mind you, I already covered the fact that God is not a man, so we're not going to look like him. Now, what the Bible talks about being the image of God, the imago Dei of God, is more of the likeness as far as thinking, being creative, having capacity for good and things of that nature. Those are the things that the likeness, and that a child does share with their parents. And so that is the more significant part.
Yeah.
But they're focused on this physical image thing, which I'm not saying is not important at all. There are studies that show that there can be some significance in seeing people that look like you do great things. You know, there could be some significance people that look like you, giving you higher levels of anxiety. I've seen that as well. I know people that have been victims of certain acts that were atrocious, and because of that, it turned them off to their own quote unquote race or ethnicity because of it. Now they only date out other ethnicities. And it's an unfortunate thing that they have going on. Some type of bias, implicit bias is developed, or that causes their cortisol levels to go up so they can't do it. Now, hopefully they can heal from those kind of things, but I've seen that happen. I've seen it on the pro and I've seen it on the con side when it comes to people dealing with their own ethnicity, all different ethnic groups, racial groups, however you want to say it. So I think that what he's saying that right there, I think he's missing the boat a lot. Then he says knowledge of self. People talk about this knowledge of self thing. And nobody ever makes them define it. So I'll take myself for it. Somebody says, "Hey, do you have knowledge of yourself?" Now, I know my name. I know, because of my memory that's not perfect, I have a good idea of how I got from where I was as a little baby to where I am now. That's myself. Now, people go back further in history to before I was born, and they go to my parents. Then by extension, go all the way back to Adam, or however you want to do it. You know, the mitochondria Eve, or the original Adam. You know, you get into the science and the biology part of it, evolutionary biology part of it, however you want to take it. My point is saying, at some point in time, you go back far enough, you're so genetically different than them, you wouldn't even really consider them a part of your ancestry at that point, even though they are. But the bigger point is that myself? Is my great-great-grandfather, who I never met, knowledge of myself? Not in the way they're using it. They're not talking about your medical history, you know what I'm saying, which may be more relevant who my great-great-grandfather was for my medical history, right? Maybe even some financial things. Maybe he was a multi-billionaire. Maybe that benefits me in some way today. But generally, people say knowledge of self, talking about some kind of information that they know, that they think you should know if you want to have knowledge of yourself. Knowledge of self, you know, you got to know where you come from. You got to know about some people in Africa, some people, you know, going back to chattel slavery. What benefit does that serve you to know that all that stuff about your ancestors? I've asked people who are white, Hispanic, and all kind of different things, "Hey, do you know who your great-great-grandfather was? Does that help you be more successful in your life today?" And they're like, "I have no idea who that person was." And no, it doesn't help me. It doesn't help me to be more successful or hurt my success. And if you're going to take it by looking at people in your past and going, "You didn't know your history," whether it's Harriet Tubman or whether it's Malcolm X or whoever you might want to say, all those people in the past, and you're saying you got to know that history. We just assume that knowing that history makes you a better person or makes you want to strive more. But then on the other side, what about the negative people throughout history? What happens with that? Is that a two-way street? As you take it in the good, or you take it in the bad as well? That stuff's never really developed because we never make anybody really answer the question of knowledge of self. Are we getting into Descartes? I think, therefore I am. What is the self? You got determinism. Do you believe in free will? And I don't want to get too much of this stuff on the show, but my point is just saying that none of these guys ever defined the self. What is it? Is the self my past? Is the self my ancestors? The self me? If I don't know whatever history they think I should know, you got to know about this right here. You got to know your history. You got to know about this right. If I don't know it, I'm still myself. So that's not a part of myself if I don't know it. I know myself. Are you saying I should know other selves? That's what that really is. There's no other selves that are out there. Saying that's not knowing myself to learn about those historical figures. We never asked the question is why should I identify with them? Again, medical history, perhaps. You need to know your ancestors' medical history, but I'm not genetically related to a lot of people. That's why there's no ancestral reason. So we need to make people start to explain why, justify why that's significant. Tell me why that's important. Don't give me the common sense answer, the common answer everybody gives me. The same old tropes people throw out there all time and time again. Really explain it, really break it down. Because what they're doing is they're playing on our intuitions. When you say knowledge of self, especially for those of us who are, African-American, foundational Black Americans, whatever you want to say, that's been ingrained in us since we were kids. Listen to the 5%ers, listen to the different movements and groups within our community. We've heard that so many times that we just take it as truth that you got to know thyself. But what is yourself? Define it for yourself. When you listen to somebody else, ask, hey, what do you mean by myself? And so those are questions that we don't really get to talk about too much because these aren't the most intellectually stimulating conversations. You typically have some kind of, especially within our activists, we do have academic activists like Michael Eric Dyson and, I would even throw Roland Martin in there and other guys like that. But primarily, even Dr. Umar Johnson, I would throw him in there. Then we have our creatives, like our rappers and our singers and our actors that like to do the armchair philosophy thing and armchair theology thing, and that's all well and good. But
the armchair theology?
Yeah, armchair theology, armchair, it just means somebody who's not really classically trained in these types of things, but they're giving their perspectives on it. And typically it's a little bit, we got the Dunning-Kruger effect. A lot of the stuff that they're saying doesn't really line up because they don't know that much about it. They mean well. And nothing wrong with us giving a good old college try to doing those kind of things. But the person who's interviewing these guys a lot of times aren't even close to their level to where they're even able to
ask these kind of questions.
Ask the right questions. Ask questions that's going to help people to see it a better way. So because of that, you end up in a situation where the conversation always stays surface level. They come on there, they yell, they beat their chest, to say, Black is beautiful, know thy history, you're dealing with this, you got to overcome all these atrocities and stuff like that. And then they drop the mic and they walk off the stage. And everybody claps.
Yeah.
But it's okay, when are we going to have the conversation? What do you actually mean by what you're saying? That doesn't take any type of intellectual work to say this stuff most of these guys are saying on these shows.
But isn't it, because if you look at the dominant society, you see that history is implemented in our curriculum. Maybe people like David Banner and Umar think it's just as important to know Black history the way we learn, our white history in this country. We need to know just as much about Black history as we know about our past history with white people. What you got to say? What would you say to that?
I would definitely say it's not as important. Just like I would say, just like if you have somebody coming from, that's living in Japan that's not Japanese, or somebody living in China that's not Chinese. They don't need to know their history just as much as the China. You need to know what's going to help you be successful in that culture, in that system, in that ecosystem. That's what you need to know. Now, I'm not saying you don't need to know anything about who you are, where you came from.
Of course.
That can be a tremendous amount of encouragement for you. Could be strength in times where you need it, or you're facing discrimination, or you feel a lot out of place, especially if you have a strong family unit there. So I would say in that situation, yeah, that could be helpful. But you need to know more than anything else what's going to help you be successful where you are.
Yeah.
Right now, you and I got transported to Rome, or we got transported to a place. We're gonna be like, okay, we got to learn, what we're at, how they do things, how they got here, how do we, whatever the case may be. So for survival, and that's the bare minimum of survival. Then we want to get to where we're thriving in that kind of economy, that kind of a system. We got the cultural mores, all that kind of stuff. So I would say in that situation, that's what's important.
And you see this when you see immigrants that come over. I doubt that. The Chinese Americans, the Middle Easterns, I doubt they know a lot about American culture for them to thrive in this society. I doubt that they, know a lot about America's past in order to be successful in the future.
Yeah. They need to know, of course, the polity. They need to know what's going on with the government. They need to know how the laws work and stuff like that. They know how the money works in that society. Those are things that are important. But whoever the dynasty that existed in China was at a certain time when they're living here in America, they don't even know that. They don't know that information.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying it's not helpful. You may want to learn about that stuff if you tend to like to learn about your history and how you came to be who you are. If you go far enough, or we start to converge as different ethnic groups anyway. We start to converge. Yeah. And so, at some point in time, all our history is going to connect. So we have to keep those things in mind as well. But yeah, I don't think that what he's saying makes much sense. So I think I covered the child doesn't look like their dad part, but just to finish up that last little piece there, just because you don't know you look like your dad doesn't mean you don't look like your dad. The features may not be as evident at the moment as they will be in 5, 10, 15 years. But what's more important than looking like your mom or your dad is possessing their values that make you an upstanding human being, that make you a good reflection of the values they instilled inside of you if those values were good.
Yeah, and that was something that stood out because, I watched a lot of action cartoons and movies back in the day. Even one of my favorite cartoons or movies was X-Men. They don't look like me, but you could still be inspired by the principles that they stand on. You don't have to identically, really look like these guys. I think that's the part that is misleading to people when he's saying things like that.
Yeah, I've known, and then you got to get into why do you know that stuff? Because I've known plenty of people who were adopted that were very successful. Yeah. I don't know who their genetic lineage was. You got people that have been adopted by people that have a different ethnic background than them, and they go off and be successful. That doesn't mean there's not going to be challenges with identity, but you're going to have those challenges. You're going to have challenges with your identity, regardless of whether thy history or not. Whether you have your parents or you don't, everybody goes to those moments where they're trying to identify who they are, figure out, who they are going to be in this world. Yeah, all of it. Even if you have your family right there, you can trace your family tree all the way back. You're still going to be on a path of self-discovery. That's going to happen no matter what. Now, you may not have to ask certain questions, but you have to ask other questions.
But see, this, for what I heard when I listened to some of these activists or what I would call Black intellectuals, I hear them say the reason why it's important to learn your history is so you could prevent the atrocities that happened in the past. You could prevent them happening in the future, and that's why we should know a historical past.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some truth to that, but I mean, I think it's generally oversimplified and overstated.
Yeah, sir.
You don't have to know. I mean, because again, it just goes to what's your history. So all American history is your history. All history from whatever region in Africa you are a part of is part of your history as well. All that's your history. So me learning about George Washington and Christopher Columbus, that's our history.
Yeah,
we live on this continent. We've been here longer than a lot of people have been here. So when they say know your history, that includes those things. Is that reasonable to say? That's a part of your history.
Yeah.
So the thing is, if I move to Japan or I move to India and I decide to live there and build a family there, whatever, all the stuff that's a part of India history that's relevant to me, that impacts what I have going on over there, how land is distributed, like financial things, all those aspects right there. That's a part of my history now because it's impacting me, it's affecting me. But all the more so when you grow up here in America, all American history is your history. From the Alamo, to whatever you're talking about, Civil Wars, everything, that's all a part of our history. So when they say know your history, we need to make them be more specific. We can't just go, okay, I know what they mean by that. And then get them to explain why. They may have a different why than we have. We assume a certain why. You're Black and you know Black history. All that history is yours.
Let's bring in nothing without Jesus said, worship in spirit and truth. Spirit nor truth is tangible. So the thought of us looking at our earthly father and saying, dang, I don't like him. Should even be, was it? Be thought. Should even be thought. Be
a thought, yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
So yeah, we can keep on going.
Yeah, let me get into the next video. Next. And shout out to David Banner too, by the way. When I'm listening, he talks with so much conviction. You got some good orator skills, man.
Yeah, and then also I want to say, the last thing on this knowledge of self thing, and I'm sure it's going to come up in another one of these videos, but just knowledge of self. For those of us who identify with the Abrahamic faiths, especially like Christianity, even Judaism, a lot of the most important thing to know is knowledge of God, knowledge of your creator, being connected to the source. So I would say that's above all more important than knowledge of self, because you can't even know yourself if you don't know what purpose you was created for. If you could just personify a toaster in your mind right now, a toaster is created by something else. For that toaster to be fulfilled in its purpose, it needs to know that it's a toaster. It's not a refrigerator. It's not a pencil. And the same way with human beings, you need to be connected to God so you know what your purpose is. And that's more important than knowledge of self. Knowledge of self will come as a direct, latent function of knowing who your creator is, knowing the attributes of God, knowing what God has said about you. So I would say that would be the foundation of knowledge of self, not creating a God in your own image. That's a circular reasoning. If you're creating your own God and then you're going to base your identity off the purpose God has for you, then you're just going in a circle. Basically, you're creating your own purpose. Most people that try to do that, they realize how vacuous that is. And they realize how hollow it is. That's my last point on that.
All right. Let's get into it.
DB is Jesus.
Yeah. but I think that's the first thing. Then I think that we must also educate ourselves, because think about this. We are the only group of people also that go to school to learn to adore our oppressor. You don't see any other race of people that does that. You don't see Jewish parents sending their Jewish kids to go learn about Nazis. You don't see that. That's not logical. So we must educate ourselves. Then we must produce our own products. We must distribute our own products. Then we must buy our own products. That's the only way that we can protect or revitalize ourselves.
David Banner is here. I know a lot of people been sitting online with questions.
Okay, let's get it.
So make your questions quick, and I'm gonna try to get to as many as.
Yeah. Shout out to David Banner. I want to comment what he said as far as we're the only people that send our people to go to schools where we adore our oppressors. Man, adore, that's a strong word, man. Adore. And
I mean, it's not even true. Everybody's sending their kids over here to go to school. So everybody's being taught a similar education. And does he take any type of solace in the fact that Blacks, we study the least, African Americans, we study the least? So the Japanese and the Nigerians and the other Asians, and they're getting more of their quote unquote oppressors adoration, developing more of an adoration for their oppressors than we are. We study the least. So we're not even picking it up as much as everybody else. So I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully, does that make them feel better? It takes some does that give them a little bit more peace of mind knowing that? I wonder. But it's just patently false. I mean, all of us who went to school from first to 12th grade, what adoration for the quote unquote oppressors is it referring to? When it was, I mean, I was in math class. I mean, I don't remember seeing a picture of Isaac Newton in them. I don't remember even seeing a picture of them. They were just names they threw at us and told us, hey, Pythagorean theorem, Pythagoras, or whatever it was. I don't know about its adoration. I mean, most of the teachers are just teaching out of these textbooks, prepare us for the test. There's not even any room for adoration with these situations. It's just not there. So I think what a lot of the situations when these people are saying those things, it sounds good to the ear for those who are already looking for a reason to hate the system as it's set up. And there's good reasons to not like the system as it's set up. It's not a perfect system, but it's a lot better than most. It's better than most systems that are out there. Mm-hmm. So I think people got to take that in consideration when they're listening to this guy say you're oppressor. I remember, they had Tariq Nasheed on the Jesse Lee Peterson show, and I saw Tariq Nasheed's name, so I clicked on it. Debate. Yeah, that was funny. And you have a guy who's made documentaries like Colors, and you have a guy who speaks about race and discrimination and other things as well. He's well versed in a lot of different subject matter. And Jesse Lee Peterson asked him straight up. He's like, "Have you been oppressed?" And he says, "How have you been oppressed?" And Tariq couldn't give him away. He's been oppressed. He said they can kill me. They can delete me at any time. Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay, but how have you been oppressed? And he couldn't give him a reason. Now, all of us have faced discrimination for color, race, height, weight. I remember I was playing ball and I kept ripping somebody. Somebody kept trying to do a crossover. And I kept just taking his cookies. Pause. And the guy kept saying, it's always the old chubby guys that give me the most problems. I had to realize, like, homeboy called me chubby. Nobody would call me really chubby, but in athletic or hip on the basketball court, I'm a chubbier guy out there compared to how I was when I was in my early 20s, right? I don't got the six pack no more. So and that was just funny that he said that, and so you see there a little bit of discrimination taking place, or a little bit of a prejudice there, whatever the case may be. And it was all lighthearted and fun. We had a great time. My point is just saying these are the different kind of things we have to take in consideration for the bigger picture. So he said, sent to school to adore the oppressor. I mean, was that your experience in first through 12th grade?
No. And that's why I was confused. I'm like, so we learn math, we learn science, how is this enduring our oppression when they just teach us the fundamentals, the scientific method, that type of stuff? When he's saying things like that, I'm like, come on, man, this is like, it's oversimplifying, racially charged, emotional words to get our attention and provoke emotion out of us, and that's the part I disagree with more.
Yeah, then you get into this, the composition and division fallacy where you have, you got different white groups that didn't get here till after chattel slavery was already over.
Yeah.
They weren't even associated with that lineage of slavery that I think he's referring to all the way up into Jim Crow and all that kind of stuff. And did they benefit from it in some ways? Absolutely. Can we say that it was a very ugly, clumpy, history with a lot of these different racial groups? For sure. But the reality is that we didn't learn about a lot of that stuff in school.
No.
And the people that came here after the fact, when they were dealing with those kind of situations, they're learning about the history of America just like we are. And it doesn't represent them at the time. They didn't always look at themselves as one big white, group. Somebody, whatever Isaac Newton happened to be, whatever you would call him racially, somebody from Poland may not identify with him. You know what I'm saying? Some Irish guy inventing something in Italian may not identify with him. That's one thing about black people. Black people, we tend to just lump everybody into one white category. Jerry Seinfeld and Bill Burr. But, other groups are like, no. Jerry Seinfeld is, a Jew. Yeah. He's not just white, so black people tend to throw it all in one category. Yeah, you white, you black, you this.
It is interesting, like you said, what we learned for the schools that our parents are sending us is like, these schools are teaching us how to analyze what you're saying, man. What's your primary source? Where you getting this information from?
Yeah.
Like, so
Yeah, the tools we learn in school benefit everybody because it teaches us how to think and reason. Now, I would argue most of us don't pick it up very much, and some of it can be surface level. But for first through 12th grade, it teaches you how to vet ideas, how to vet people. So whatever you're being taught in school, you're also being given the tools in order to be able to differentiate between what's right and wrong and what's true and false at the same time. So even if a particular teacher wanted to pass on and disseminate some type of adoration for the white intellectuals and contributors of scientific advancement or whatever it was, a literature advancement or whatever, if they wanted to do that, that's that one teacher. And also in that curriculum and that textbook is teaching how do you vet this? Whether it's scientific method, whether it's peer review, whether it's certain critical thinking tools, historical methods, primary source, you start learning about how to decipher all these things and put it all together in a cohesive way that makes sense. So if you're getting the tools in order to decipher things along with whatever that particular teacher wants to give you or brainwash you into, if you're going to take it that way, which that wasn't my experience. And I went to a lot of schools. That wasn't my experience. So I think a lot of this, again, is just sophistry. Just him appealing to our emotions.
But let me ask you this. What do you say to when you see these activists, since we're talking about David, Black activists who have solutions for social interaction, social behaviors, like, oh, first what we need to do is this. We need to stop going to our schools. What do you say about people that have a solution that you can't really test to see if these things are really, we can really benefit from this for our people? We really benefit from that.
Well, I think that's a really good question. I think one, are they in their field of study?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are they in their field of study?
Okay.
So, okay, this person is given economic explanations or economic solutions for economic problems. Are they in their field of study? If they're not, that doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means, okay, now I want to know what the work they've done a little bit closer. It'll be more difficult to detect it because they don't have any kind of published academic work on this issue, right? It's going to be harder to trace their background and where they're coming, how they're coming to arrive at what they've arrived at, and they don't have anybody really that they've probably debated in that kind of way, so we can hear their ideas put to the test, whether it's in writing or verbally. So now we're dealing with somebody. Now, if this person is going to step into the arena that they're not very skilled in or formally trained in, then I want to look at, okay, what are they saying? Who are they debating? What's their literature? What are they writing? What are people in that field saying about what they're saying? Are they putting their thoughts up to the test? That's a certain level of confidence when somebody's willing to do that. Just like you see, when it comes to the UFC or the NBA, the best teams got to play. In the NFL, the best teams got to play at some point in time. Talk is talk. You can look at stats.
Yeah.
You can see people's 40s. You can see people run routes during their practices and stuff like that. But eventually, they got to get on that field and they got to play. And so boxing, the same thing. So in the same way that how it is in the physical realm, it's also that same way in the intellectual realm. You have ideas that aren't as easy to test because it's not direct combat. It's not something that we're going to be able to see in real time unless you have the power to make that change. So if we're just considering this notion you have of improvement, do you have the intellectual integrity to put it up to be vetted by other people who are skilled in that particular discipline? When you listen to Dr. Umar Johnson or you listen to David Banner, who are these guys debating? Whether you love it or hate it, you see a lot of political pundits that we may like or may not like. They're going on the college campuses. They're debating. They're going to the community college level. They're going to the junior college level. They're going to the university level. They're going to the Ivy League university level. They're debating all the young and bright minds who have an opinion on every different issue. They get made fun of. They get cross-examined, all that kind of stuff, because true intellectualism, anybody who really believes that they have something to contribute to society is willing to have it vetted. willing to have it deciphered and figured out, willing to have it probed, willing to have it analyzed and evaluated. That's what we learned in school, 1st to 12th grade. Scientific method again. That's what you have when you have a debate team. They're gonna debate the ideas out. Battle rap. Okay, you say you're a better rapper than me. We're gonna do a battle rap.
Yeah.
You say you're faster, we're gonna race. We all learn this stuff in school. Why are we giving guys like this a pass? What public debate have we seen David Banner in?
And it's
Dude's
interesting,
50,
like
the dude's 50
you
years
don't
old.
see that. You haven't seen that in the last 50 years. A lot of black teachers, no, I don't want to say black teachers, but black activists. But when you do come across those that are considered higher intellects, like for example, if I bring up John Henry Clark, one of his famous quotes was, "I don't debate my equals, others I teach." I forgot how he put
He
it.
says,
but
I only debate my equals, all others I teach.
yes. Yes.
You know,
So-
and that again, that feels good to the intuition. It sounds common sense, make it like it's good, and you have the liberty to debate who you want. So above all, you know, you have the decision to determine whether or not you think somebody's worth your time in a debate. But I guess my concern with that kind of a thinking is, how do you determine if that person's your equal or not? You know, if somebody's going to have that stance, fine. Do you have a rubric on how you determine if somebody's your equal or not? Because you see this happen all on the podcast world all the time. Somebody may take a debate with somebody, like, you know, Billy Carson when he debated Wes Huff, and it was like more of an impromptu debate. It wasn't a formal debate. But is Billy Carson on Wes Huff's level? Of course not. Wes Huff is a formally trained in history and ancient texts. Billy Carson is a self-taught guy, who is not even aware of the scientific methods involved in what he's doing, from what we saw in that debate, which we already kind of suspected. So they're not on a level, but Billy Carson's a bigger name. Billy Carson's more popular, so he's on his level in that way. So I think when somebody's saying on my level or equal to me, in what way? In knowledge, in popularity, in impact, you know, as well as equal in debate formats. Because you could take somebody who has your knowledge base, but not the best communicator. So there's all these different variables. I would just ask somebody who wants to use that type of mantra or that type of perspective. I only debate my equals, all others I teach. How do you determine who's your equal? Or you just picking and choosing based off what suits you? So I think a lot, just like you see this cherry picking stuff happening in the boxing world, people always lament boxing because the best boxers don't always box. They don't always box when they're both in their prime. They go, oh man, he's too dangerous, I'm not gonna mess with him. And boxing, because it's on the big stage, it's violence, we see it, we know right away, like, hey, look, that person's ducking somebody. We suspect that person's ducking somebody else. We need to start calling out these public intellectuals, these activists in the same way. Why are you ducking so-and-so? He would have you on. If he saw the amount of followers you had, he would let you on. Why are you avoiding the debate? Because you don't do this for real. You don't do this for real. You have the same basic talking points to stir people up, but you know if you went into that arena, you went into that square circle, you would get annihilated. That's what happened with Lord Jamar when he debated that guy on the flat earth. That's what happened to Billy Carson when he was debating with Wes Huff. Got annihilated. That's what happened with that lady, that feminist lady was debating Dr. Jordan Peterson. Two different ones. Got annihilated. And that's fine. Put your ideas, you know, go back to the drawing board, go back to wood shop, work on your ideas and bring them back out again. That's how it works. This is what scientists are doing all the time. That's what boxers and NBA players and people in sports on the college level, high school level doing all the time. You fighting for that top spot. You train and hopefully get the starting spot and then maintain it and then beat other teams on top of that. That's what everybody's doing in all those arenas. But we let people get on stage and talk, these public intellectuals and our community specifically get up and not have to do any kind of debate, any type of proving that they know what they're talking about. And we consider these guys to be our thought leaders.
Man.
Unproven. Last thing I'll say is there's a quote, I think it's a Mark Twain quote, that says the weakest of all weak things is a virtue that has not been tested in the fire. Let these guys prove it. That's the weakest of all weak things. These are some of these guys are rappers and musicians. They already know that world. We just had the verses during the pandemic, didn't we?
Yeah.
And shout out to them for going on and doing that. The guys who won and the guys who lost. Shout out to them for going on stage to try to prove it on the big stage. What else we got?
You see that, and some of these black activists, you see they say a lot of negative things about some of these black conservatives. One thing I could say, what I noticed and what I observe with some of these black conservatives, I'm like, they always debating. You see them debating on Bill Maher. You see them on college campuses. You see them doing these things. And some of these people do have background or expertise in economics, so they could back up a lot of things they're saying. So that let's, I'm gonna encourage the audience to be mindful of that. See that, if you come across some of these actors, ask them why they haven't debated some of these other intellectuals. So I think a quote Bill Maher. He actually said that about I forgot the group, but yeah.
That's 100% facts.
All right. Let's go ahead and let me read some comments. Shout out to Nothing Without Jesus said, knowing what God has said about you, this has given he has given us our identity. Shout out to Nothing Without Jesus.
Very, very
All right,
true.
let's go ahead and get to the next video. I want to get your thoughts on this.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go.
Said that religion was for the weak. Can you kind of expound on it just a little bit?
You try to get me in trouble, huh? What I said was
I'm gonna rewind it a little bit.
And uninformed.
You said that religion was for the weak. Can you kind of expound on it just a little bit?
You try to get me in trouble, huh? What I said was religion is for the weak and uninformed.
Yes, you did say uninformed.
What it is this. The people who give you religion also use control the population, right? Whoever owns that particular type of Bible, they are usually the ones that own the populace, right? Religion has all of these rules that you're not supposed to do, but the people who gave you those books, they're not abiding by those rules, are they? White folks killing our kids every damn day, aren't they? Oh, one last thing. Would y'all listen to this? Take off. I'm taking my and then I gotta go. Hold it. So watch this. You can turn on your damn Instagram for this shit. All right. Black folks always say, well, black folks is killing black folks. Why we gonna talk about white folks killing black folks when black folks killing black folks? First of all, it ain't the same thing. If you my sister, I can talk about your raggedy ass every day, but let somebody else talk about y'all knock their face off. I ain't talking about you, raggedy baby. Don't jump on me. I see you got ready. You was like, shit, I like you, David Banner, but the fact is this. I'm going to prove to you all right now that that's not true. All right. And you may have heard me say this before. Isn't the central processing unit of a computer based on the human brain? Yes or no? Central processing unit, right? So I told y'all before that culture is about language, history, family, and all of these things, right? So let's say if a computer programmer erased all of the history off a central processing unit, right? Then they uploaded a virus, right? When the computer started freaking out, would you blame the central processing unit or the programmer? Africans did not come over here as niggers. That was a program. We have been programmed. Black folks don't even know why they hate themselves the way that they do. They hate themselves because they've been programmed to want to be a white person. And white people disdain the fact that they can't grow their hair like you. And in actuality, what people don't know, I'm going to tell you something about white folks you may not know. White folks really hate you, not so much, well, they are racist, but for the most part, some white people, a lot of them, hate you because it's survival. You are the dominant gene. If black people keep having sex at the rate that they do, they will annihilate everybody else in the population because you are the dominant gene. If you put a black and a white person together, you're going to have a black child. You are killing them just by existing.
Yeah, there you go. There you go, David Banner. Another interesting video. I would say I'm gonna say my 2 cents. I'm gonna let more Vulcan to really chime in on this. The audience, the pseudoscience, the genetics annihilation. Forgive me for laughing. It's just that this is what I mean. Where a lot of our black activists they able to live and hide behind ambiguity. Where and when I say pseudoscience, pseudoscience, those claims are not verified by scientific methods. So this is what we call the falsifiability. You can't prove these things. You can't prove these things wrong, right? Because how are you going to really find out if you ask all the people in the dominant society, and this is the reason why? Oh, there's people that's racist. This is the reason why they believe or practice racism. That's the benefit that a lot of our black activists they could just say these things and not actually get questioned.
Yeah, and then it's not really gender specific. I mean, a lot of research is just that the second or the first or second most attractive man in the country is a black man. Maybe even worldwide, I don't know, but I know like in the Western world, that's one of the most attractive things, primarily by white women.
Yeah.
So you see a major push by white women to go after black men or to be open to black men. So are he specifically talking about white men or Hispanic men or whatever way he wants to say? Because that's not what you're observing out in the world. That's not what a lot of the dating app statistics are supporting. So he's saying that whites want you to, but even a bigger point. I try to take notes again on this, and I'm going to kind of skip around because I want to address what he's talking about as far as the we're killing them by mere existence. And this one again goes back to that. Oh man, hold on. I think I had too much coffee today. I went through my nose, came back up in my nose.
That's not good.
Yeah. So what I was saying. So yeah, as far as he was talking about, as far as we're killing them by our mere existence or by interbreeding with them, I think what his point is, what is the them? Is the them their color? If a white guy and a black woman have a child, that child is reflected in both parents. Now, phenotype may change, but they're still reflected by both parents. So I don't get the whole point of saying that. Sorry, hold on. There's something. Hold on, take over real quick.
All right. Yeah. So. Yeah, that's what that was some of the things I noticed. Another thing as far as that we are not, we call it N-words. Africans didn't come over to be N-words. Programming. That's what I want to say. The computer program. That was interesting. He said the central processing compared to human. I mean, the computer was designed by, the central processor was inspired or designed by the human brain. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, you're not accounting for what's the word I want to use? I think about that if you want to chime in on it.
Yeah, so again, I was making the point that if a white man and a black woman have a baby together, that baby is both of them. So he's saying you're killing them off. No, that those genes continue. Just because one's dominant and recessive doesn't mean that the genes don't continue. It just means one's going to be more evident than the other. You know what I'm saying? If it has to pick between, brown or blue eyes, yeah, the brown eyes most likely is gonna, and most of the progeny is gonna show. But the traits, the genetics of both parents can carry on. The color may change, but by that case, you can say you have a white man and a black woman have a baby. The baby typically is gonna come out lighter than the black person and darker than the white person. So did both of them die in that situation? Are we really going to be so reductionistic that we're going to reduce who the person is to their hue? So it just doesn't make any sense scientifically to say that they're dying off. Now, if somebody's whole identity is their color, my color is choosing my identity, then yes, if you have babies with anybody who doesn't have the same exact color as you, and even that's not 100%, then you died. because your color, sorry, that you didn't die because your color continued. But of all the different attributes of Enos and Vulcan, you know, thousands, if not millions of attributes, from our nose size to our hair color to our beard texture and to our shoulder width and, you know, our feet size, all there's hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of attributes. We could just line up everybody's attributes from start to finish, from, you know, length of the eye to the other eye, all that kind of stuff. You know, the color aspect is going to change just like every other aspect is going to change. How is that somebody dying off? Their genetics made it to the next generation. They didn't die off. I mean, they're gonna pass away, but their genetics will continue. So again, it's a shifty play on words. It's more sophistry. It sounds good to the ear if you don't think about it too deeply, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's just a color dying off, if you will. Which is not even true, because if that kid has babies with somebody of a similar complexion as their parents, and that person's kids does, the color might come right back. You see this with blacks during slavery or right after slavery that were passing, white passing.
Yeah.
It might be a generation or two, and they're white passing. So the whole idea of that sounds good to people who don't know anything about genetics, but anybody who understands genetics is going to realize that's ridiculous. It's retarded. Most of all, we can't say that. It's mentally handicapped.
Yeah, what I was saying earlier, as far as the computer, I get what he was trying to do. As far as it robs people of agency when you compare people to computers. Like we just this robots, so we, you know, came to this country, we just don't have no moral responsibility.
Yeah, no free will. It's just I'm a robot. They took out my program and put new programming in. It discounts anything your parents may have done during that whole time period. All that kind of stuff, all the learning you do, all the stuff that you download from God, all that stuff is erased. Just the oppressor shoved some programming up and you're just having to act on that programming. It's ridiculous. Then he says religion's for the weak. Now, the reality is this. One of the main things that civilizations that want to really be in control, we're talking about communist places and stuff like that, is they try to get rid of religion. Because that's one of the main things that keep people from getting on the page of the oppressor. So far from religion being for the weak, I mean, just kind of use the book of the book of Eli as a reference. You know, yes, the villain in that movie wanted to use the Bible for control, right? But the main character was using the Bible in a substance in order to endure the hardship he had to endure to be able to get to the end, and to be a liberator of people. So the reality is that one man's tool for control is another man's tool for liberation. So, I mean, just because it can be used either way doesn't make the tool any less effective or any less valuable. So when he's talking about religion is for the weak, to me, it just rings with this elitism. You know, when these guys have been successful financially and they read a book or two, and you know, and the normal rules of society don't apply to them, and the grass is green on their side because they don't have to deal with a lot of the hardships that people that don't have their access to resources deal with. They start to get full of themselves. You see this is the theme in the Bible. You know, it's with Satan. You know, Lucifer. You know, how I lifted up, oh Lucifer, how the text says it, but just basically this, you know, proud being who thinks that they're closer to God. And that's what you see with David Banner. You know, you got a guy from the poorest state in the country that now is, you know, attained, you know, massive success and popularity and money, and now he thinks that religion is for the weak. You know, was it 2 weeks? Was it? What about your grandma?
Yeah.
What about our
ancestors?
ancestors?
His mom was a pastor, so he grew up.
Yeah, how is that for the weak? I mean, how can you dare say that that's weakness? That's strength.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that was the only strength people had. When the people didn't have the situations that he had, they were in desperate situations, and all they had was their faith. That was a strength. People have done amazing and great things because of that type of strength. So religion is definitely not for the weak. But even if religion was for the weak, what would that say? So what? You know, what if God's chosen the weak to be rich in spirit? rich in faith. That's literally what the text says. The poor of this world, the weak, the destitute. Who is Christ healing? The lepers. Who was he going against? The Pharisees. People that believed they were strong, the people that were able to like play a horn and sound the trumpet when they would put alms inside the little money thing and show how big and bad they were. So the part of the problem is that we have this elitist mentality where we think that we're above the quote unquote weak of society. They're humans just like we are. Religion is for the weak. Who needs it the most? At least they recognize they need it. It's the ones who quote unquote strong that need it more than they think they do. And we're all weak in different ways. You got Steve Jobs who, gets an incurable disease and passes away. Was he weak? You got what's that guy who was a big time bodybuilder, Ronnie? I can't remember the guy's name. You see him now, he's hunched over. You see all those guys, C.T. Fletcher, a lot of those California muscle guys that were big and strong, a lot of heart issues and stuff like that. Any of us who think we're strong, we better take heed lest we stumble our own selves. Any of us can be humbled by any manner of situations in and out of our control. But when we think we've attained a certain level of success, like we've arrived, and now we're the strong, and we look down on the peasants and go look at them with their archaic belief systems, and when they don't have the lavish lifestyle that I have. To me, this goes against everything that he tries to pretend he stands for.
Oh.
He pretends to stand for it, but we've done videos on him in the past where he was talking about the reason why the people in the hood don't like the bourgeoisie, black people that went and got educated and left is because they're supposed to come back and bring the resources back and they didn't do it, whatever he was talking about, right? So that was his point he was making. But he sounds like that. Religion is for the weak. That may, in fact, be true because there's a lot of scriptures that do sound like that and talk like that. This man-made system that we're all in of resources and bench pressing and sports and competition, that stuff's all cool while we're on this place, but there's things way more important in life than that. I hope he never has to be in a situation where he has to feel weak. Will then religion be for him? So he says religion is for the weak.
Religion is weak, and then comparing us to computers without. That's just. When I heard that comparison, I'm like, man, that's how David Banner really looks at his people, man. Shout out to my guy. Well, nothing without Jesus says, what are Christians bragging? Permissions?
Oh, Ronnie Coleman, there we go.
Huh?
Yeah. So yeah, we got some questions we're gonna put up there.
They say ain't nothing but a peanut. Ronnie Coleman,
yeah.
Shout out to Freshly Sliced.
Yeah, Ronnie Coleman, that's what I was referring to. You see him now, he's hunched over and stuff like that. Bodybuilding, weightlifting legend. Even the strong will eventually become weak. That's how life goes.
Yeah.
And the weak become strong. Any other comments?
Yeah, let's see. This is some comments. Let me see. Nah, no comments on this. We got some on the next video.
I saw you post one that we didn't talk about.
Oh, comments for our listeners. Yeah. Hold on. Let me. I thought you were referring to comments. All right. Nothing without Jesus says. So is God unpleased with Black pride groups / movements? Question for Vulcan.
I would definitely say, generally speaking, yes. The scriptures we're told to only boast in Christ. Let another praise you, not your own lips. What part of the whole theme of the New Testament is you see Paul doing it, you see Jesus doing it. They're making it clear to the religious of their day that your race or group is not going to save you. He said, do you think you're children of Abraham? God can make children out of these rocks. Excuse me. One of the texts, I think it's in Titus, maybe Timothy, but it talks about how, of what people that go on and on about genealogies. So the general thing you see in the scripture is that we shouldn't take pride in ourselves just because of a certain skin tone or certain genetic heritage. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't take pride in who you are and where you come from, in the sense of having a certain level of confidence in it and not being ashamed of it. I'm not saying that you need to be ashamed of who you are. So if I were to just create this makeshift example on the spot, you got being ashamed of something, you got being neutral, and you got being, pedestalizing a certain aspect of yourself or have a certain reverence for it. I would say you definitely shouldn't be ashamed of it. Now, I think a more appropriate stance would be the neutral. It's okay to take pride in who you are, but as long as you recognize that it was arbitrary. You could have easily been born a white person or an Asian person or a Japanese person or an Indian person. You could have just as easily been born that way, So if that's the case, how much boasting can you really do in those things? How much pride can you really take in something that was arbitrary? It's like, somebody, we draw straws for a certain kind of thing, and then you win. And then so you're like, yeah, I'm better than y'all. But people looking at like, what is this guy talking about? That was random. You see what I'm saying? We do that all the time. People playing dominoes and playing spades, especially with dominoes. You could tell somebody who might be winning, but you're like, there's no strategy going on over there. There's no strategy. They're just connecting numbers and numbers, and they happen to be getting money right now. Probably because the person that's going before them can't play even worse than them. So you're like, not that you're good, you're randomly winning. And the same thing goes with things like this, where you're randomly black. You're randomly whatever height you are, based off of your parents and whatever else. So how much pride can you really take in that? You didn't work to that. You didn't earn that. We typically take pride in things that we have to work for and earn. People are like, oh, so-and-so's handsome. Once or twice in my life, I've been called handsome. I'm sure you've been called handsome, And I think, well, I put a little bit of paint over the old barn, but most of this is genetic. I can try to trim it up a little bit and keep it looking nice, but all of this stuff is random from our vantage point as human beings. So people talk about, so going back to the question, so is God unpleased with Black pride groups and movements? It depends to what extent they're trying to paint the picture of them being proud. If you're placing the focus, the lens on you having this random attribute, I think that you're in error. I think that you're not being intellectually honest about the situation. And a lot of it, to me, ends up being really masked cope for insecurities they have. It's a cope.
It seems like that would be the purpose, right? People that have insecurities, this could help their self-esteem. Black, and I'm proud to, how Black folks have been viewed, especially with beauty standards. Makes sense why they would.
It goes back to what I was saying earlier. A great point. I think from a theological standpoint, you would really want to get your confidence and esteem from God.
Okay.
The Bible says you're fearfully and wonderfully made. You were knit together in your mother's womb. These are things that you're told. And then, that if you've been elected by God for salvation, those are things that you should take esteem in, not because anything's special in you, because God is special. It's special because God is special. And he sets his affection on you for whatever reason that is, that we may not be aware of. So my point is saying that would be the ultimate thing, is just, what does God say about you? That's why I think that we're in this crazy place now. Everybody wants to pick, arbitrarily, not even really arbitrarily. People want to pick based off what their insecurities are, what they happen to be strong in. So if I happen to be 6'6", I'm be like, I'm tall, y'all are short, y'all suck. If I happen to be really good looking, I'm good looking, y'all are ugly, y'all suck. If I happen to be just have a higher IQ than most people, I'm gonna say I'm really, really smart, y'all are dumb, y'all suck. So everybody's gonna pick their thing. I see it all the times happen in the corporate settings or business settings. Somebody has one thing that they're really good at, like they're good at math. Like, hey, look, man, this guy can really do math. They want to make fun of the other person because they just happen to be able to do math better than the other person. That person can be better than them in every other thing in life. But because they're better than that one person that happens to be standing out at the moment, they're going to ride that till the wheels fall off. Very convenient. So I just say, going back to what David Banner is saying, we're talking about religions for the week, or we're dealing with that question. The question of these black groups and stuff like that. My main point is just to say that when it comes to those kind of things, what are you reveling in? Are you reveling in something that you had no control over? That kind of esteem, getting esteem that way is very hollow and it doesn't last very long. It's like eating cheap food. This might fill you up, but eventually you're gonna realize there's no sustenance in that. That's why you should get your confidence from real achievement.
Yeah.
Whatever God's purpose you would be doing, you're doing that. You walk on your calling. You're ministering to people. You're serving people. You're serving yourself. Your people that you care about. Your families. Those types of things we tend to get. That's one of the people that are dealing with lots of depression. One thing they recommend is what they go serve others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Get outside of yourself. For those Christians, you're told to look towards Jesus and not take your eyes off of Jesus. You start to sink. So I'll say that's going to be a more sustaining esteem. Not picking some random attribute of yours. Well, I got nice eyebrows, so now I'm talking about how I can take pride in my eyebrows, and that's what gives me my esteem to continue carrying on in life and feel good about myself. What happens if my eyebrows get taken from me?
You know what else I noticed too? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you made a good point as far as, especially with with a Judeo-Christian, they tell you to, look towards Jesus, look outside of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and like you said, if you're dealing with depression, therapists will advise you, look out of yourself and go help others. And I think the underlying thing, when you look at some of these activists, their belief system, they more have their faith aligned with Eastern ontology belief systems, where the goal is to look inward. I think that was the difference between Demarcus, I forgot his name, versus Socrates. It's better to look outside. Others say no, look inside, and that's what we see with the Black empowerment stuff. Like inside, Black and I'm proud, more focus on internal instead of focus on the outside. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's truth to both of them. Obviously, the two are connected. For me to see outside better, I have to look inward. For me to look inward better, I got to look outside. Just to give a quick example of that, I have whatever knowledge I have right now. So if I'm looking at something outside of myself, right? So I could be looking at another person. What biases do I have that are filtering my vision of that person or that particular thing? Maybe I have a certain assumption about something I'm observing that's untrue. So I got to look inward and be self-aware of what's going on and go, like, you know what? I have that certain preconceived notion that's debilitating, and it's affecting how I view this particular thing I'm observing outside of myself. Conversely, if I'm looking inward and I'm observing myself from inward, being self-aware and reflecting on my thoughts and who I am, I need to take outside information in to get better at doing that. It could be a friend. It could be family. Hey, look, you know what? Yeah, I'm looking at this, man. I did a horrible job at this right here. Horrible job. You're in the 99th percentile doing that. Hey, look at this statistic right here. Hey, look at this over here. And now I look at it, I'm like, hold on, based off that, hey, I see myself a little bit different. So you're going to see both playing a role. Sometimes you got to look inward to see outward better. Sometimes you got to look outward to see inward better. And that's the reality. So my point is saying that is that, I'm leery of like false dichotomies of Eastern and Zen and, Western, because all these religions come from the East.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, all these religions come from the East. I think we tend to look at Christian as a Western thing because it spread through the West, because Paul, went to the West when he was spreading the gospel. The disciples very similarly, but truthfully, this is all Eastern stuff. You see what I'm saying? And in the ancient world. And the people that you see over there in India now may not have been in that region, whenever this stuff was going on. People were moving and wars were taking place, people getting transported from one place to another. You don't know who was there at what time when stuff was going on. We still don't know what pyramids were built when in Egypt and stuff like that, and who was in power when that stuff was happening. Every time I watch another history channel thing, I get more confused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of history, and that's what a lot of our activists advocate for, is to know more about history, but it's a soft science, so it's not concrete truths, you know.
Really good point on that. So that's a difficulty with a lot of that history stuff, is that, you know, what happens when it changes? If you're basing your knowledge of self off history, what happens when another redacted document comes out from the White House about Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or whatever it is, or, you know, we do some more excavation, we discover that Timbuktu or, you know, Mansa Musa wasn't exactly how people said he was. You know, you're going to base your identity and your confidence on something that's so feeble and so changing and fluid. How are you going to be able to guarantee the scalable model at the end of all that? That's why I say base it off of God. Base it off the accomplishments you have in your life. Base it off the people that you trust and love in your family. Because again, if you're going to go off knowledge of self and history, then you got to look at the bad along with the good. I'm proud of so-and-so, not so proud of so-and-so. I don't know if you remember the movie Hitch. In the movie Hitch, Will Smith's character was trying to impress Eva Mendez's character. Excuse me. And so he thought what he would do is go to Ellis Island and find the book where it shows all the different immigrants that were coming in and show her family when her family got over there to New York area, right? But the ancestor that he showed her in the book was somebody who was a criminal, a violent criminal. He was something the butcher, you know. And so she was looking at it like, oh my gosh. And all of a sudden she starts crying and he's like, what happened? What happened? She runs off and he has to chase her down and come to find out that ancestor of hers, which he thought was going to be, what is her history, she's going to be proud of this, was actually somebody that her family doesn't want to talk about because this person was an evil person. And so when you look at history works both ways. You know, blacks have done some great things. Blacks have done some horrible things. Whites have done some great things. Whites have done some horrible things, and you got to split up the whites and you got to split up the blacks. We tend to think of Africa as and unfortunately with our education system, I watch all these videos and stuff online at times, and people think Africa is a country.
Yeah.
Africa is a continent, huge continent. And so there's all kind of people groups and different religions. And that goes back to David Banner talking about, you got to pick your own religion or, you know, the religion of your ancestors. Oh yeah. So he says, for the uninformed and weak, he says religions for the uninformed and weak. It says, give you religion. They give you religion, gives you control. For most of us today, we're not given religion by by anybody other than our parents. You know, we choose to go to places where they give you religion outside of your parents, whether it's church or some kind of group or something like that. But you're primarily getting it from there. And so when he's saying that your parents trying to control you, well, kind of. We need to be controlled to that to some extent. We're out of control as kids in a lot of ways. So this is a tired argument that's used over and over again. People buy into it because they don't think when he's saying it. They just go with their intuition, their gut. Like, yeah, we've heard it so much in the music, so much, you know, over the TV that we just think, oh, that's exactly what it is. But the reality is this: people that give you religion, typically, for most of us, is people that love and care about us. Right, wrong, or indifferent. They're giving you what they believe, what they follow, loosely or rigidly. They're giving that to you. So again, when he says this, and that's my issue with a lot of these guys, these pseudo intellectuals, I would say, is because they don't care about the tenses. So they say they give you this, they give you, who's the they, and when did they give this to me? I'm here in the current right now, in the present. You're talking about something that happened 300 years ago, 400 years ago. And then if you go back even further than that, 500, 600 years ago, how do you know my people didn't have the religion I have now back then? Islam was over there. Christianity was over there. Judaism was over there. There's good evidence to suggest that a lot of that, some of the slaves already had those religious beliefs.
That's that recency bias, yeah.
Yeah, so my point is saying, well, a lot of these guys right here, they're playing on your ignorance and they're playing on your confirmation bias that you already want to believe this. So you're not going to ask any more questions than you have to. Ask these guys like David Banner to go on the big stage and debate these ideas with other public intellectuals. Let's see if he'll do it.
Yeah, and I just also too that he says that they gave us religion, they gave us the. But I'm like, what about the virtues and the morals that's in there? Are you saying they gave us virtues? Why do we associate whiteness with virtues? Like this is outside of color, character, principles, worship, and morals is not tied to a particular group.
Yeah, the oldest church in Ethiopia.
Yeah, that's what they said. Yeah.
So just because you're looking at the people, and again, that just shows his lack of imagination, his lack of forethought and understanding of history when he suggests things like that. So my concern for all you folks out there, everybody who wants to be logical and critical and have it be fair-minded and balanced, why is he saying these? Is he ignorant or is he purposely trying to deceive you? That's what you gotta ask yourself. Who is this they? Most of us were given the Bible by our parents, the Quran by our parents. And you want to say because for control, yeah, you needed control. He was wild, running around with no diaper on, hitting your siblings. They put the fear of God in you. So maybe that was a good thing. And then he talks about black folks talking about killing black folks. We got to talk about it all. Everybody killing everybody. This is my issue with the whole black on black crime thing. These black pseudo intellectuals talking about getting mad at people that bring up black on black crime. Every topic needs to have a seat at the table. Every person's perspective needs to have a seat at the table and be weeded out with reason and logic. Okay, yeah, your idea, now we can confirm your idea sucks. You no longer need to be sitting here. So either we got to put somebody in here that has a better version of your argument. You got to go and change it up and switch it up and get a better way of articulating it and make better points, or you can't sit there no more. But everybody gets to sit at the table. We do need to address, blacks deleting blacks. We do need to address, police brutality. We address all those issues. And to me, it's very telling that they want to minimize or undermine that conversation. The leading cause of the deletion for you and I is somebody that quote unquote looks like us taking us out. Can we talk about that? If somebody's talking about police brutality, I can talk about that. If somebody talks about blacks deleting blacks, I can talk about that. But when you talk about the blacks deleting blacks, somebody's gonna get in their feelings and be like, oh, here you go with that. You talking like so-and-so and this, that, and the other. When can we have that conversation? Why is it I don't get the benefit of the doubt in that conversation that I want to do this for good purposes?
Even if you hint question on, want to have more of a dialogue about black crime, you hit with all kind of ad hominem attacks. I'm saying it wrong, but
ad hominem attacks, yeah.
Yeah, like
they attack you whether they're your person.
Like, this is something we need to consider. We need to have a real discussion about this, especially when you look at the CDC reports and they saying that most likely that black men from the ages of 15 to 40, might have the numbers wrong, but it's most likely homicide. That's something that we really need to have a real discussion about.
Yeah.
Or to the CDC reports.
They'd be like, don't be saying this stuff in front of white folks or whatever it is. It's like they read these statistics. They know these statistics.
Yeah.
We're not hiding from nobody. This is what it is. We need to solve this problem.
Yeah.
You whether those of us, those that quote unquote look like us, keep on being deleted because we can't have the conversation publicly. We can't start making cultural changes to address those issues. It's crazy. Yeah. So, when he's talking about that, to me, it would be a little more, show a little bit more maturity on his part if you were to say it's something we need to be addressed. None of us like a conversation being hijacked by somebody with an ulterior motive. So I get it. If you're talking about one thing and somebody's bringing us something else without even addressing what you're talking about, nobody likes that. But a lot of times we don't even, it's not even somebody's changing the topic to black on black crime, whatever you want to call it. It's somebody bringing it up and they're going and they just dismiss it. The more we dismiss it, the bigger it gets, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
Anything else you got? We got any comments or anything? Or
no comments.
all right.
Shout out nothing but Jesus. She said 100 laughing emojis in the comments. Appreciate your comments. Nothing but Jesus. Nothing without Jesus. I'm sorry. All right, let's go ahead and get to the next video. I think this is let's get right and see that. All right, here
Yes,
we go.
sir.
What, in your opinion, what actually, if you had to define what God is, because obviously something's eternal that's always been here. I call that God. What if you had to define God? What would you say that is?
You can't. God is limitless.
Right.
God is everything. See, people try to break God up into evil and good. Everything.
Okay, pause it real quick.
As a mini God that you can't do.
See, this is when it gets to being intellectually consistent. I want everybody out there to hear this. The guy said, how would you define God? He says you can't. Once you say you can't, you got to stop. Now, I would debate saying you can't define God is a part of a definition of God, being undefinable. But I'll let that one pass. Then he says God is everything. God is this. God is limitless. God is infinite. Those are descriptors. He is now defining God. So much so that that's literally what you see in the Bible. He's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. That's literally what David Banner is saying. That's defining God. The Bible gives us the attributes of God. He's defining the attributes of God. And I think the audience needs to hear that. Y'all, when y'all hear these sophists say things like that, because they got a nice big old fro, and we go, okay, he got some grade to him. We're going, okay, that's some wisdom. And he's got a really great voice. I wish I had a voice like this guy. And so it sounds amazing. It sounds great. But the reality is he contradicted himself within the first 20, 30 seconds. He said you can't define God, then begins to define gods. He even defines God how most Abrahamic religions would define God. So some of God's most pedestalized attributes. But how many people you think Enos caught that?
No, not a lot. Right there in the first sentence.
Right there in the first sentences.
Law of identity. Right.
All right, yeah, we keep going.
Yeah. They say you can't, but this is how you define them.
Yeah. You can't, but I'm about to do it.
Now there's some things as
maybe he was,
as
hold on.
mini God that you can't do.
Maybe he was saying you can't. He said you can't. He was saying no, you can't. I'm David Banner. I can do it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let's give him that. My bad. I was muted. Yeah.
People
All right, here we go.
People try to break God up into limitless.
Find God. What would you say that is?
You can't. God is limitless.
Right.
God is everything. See, people try to break God up into evil and good. God is everything. Now, there's some things as a mini God that you can't do. You can tell when you're not doing the right thing because you can feel it in your body. That's the reason why we get depressed. That's the reason why we get angry. All you have, when you feel peace, that's God. That's balance. See, I'm going to tell you what the God concept is.
You can pause it real quick. But we just be able to see the video anyway. But yeah, he's already covered the you can't part. Then he says, God is everything. People try to put God in the good and evil, and God is everything. This is what's classically called pantheism. Pan, meaning many or all. God is all things. Now, the thing about people having this belief, a lot of this stuff was stomped out by most of the constituents and practitioners of these type of philosophies by the Abrahamic religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, especially Christianity and Islam, because they make up, more than half of the religious belief that's out there in the world. And part of the reason is most of us appreciate science. If you think that everything is God, meaning everything is sacred, everything is God, then it's going to make it hard to do science. One of the reasons why we have modern science, the institution in the West, and it developed so well in the Western world, is because we do not look at inanimate objects as divine. So you'll play with different types of chemicals and different types of metals and try to create things and tear things down and build things up. People that have the mindset that everything is sacred and everything is divine, they don't like touching that stuff. They like leaving it alone. They may worship it. They may celebrate it. So you can't have science developing out of those kind of things, because whatever you're trying to do scientific development with, to you, is something that you shouldn't be playing with. So that's one thing on the pantheism side, why it doesn't work as far as like building societies technologically, scientifically. Apart from that, when you say God is everything, we need to, that's what I'm saying, these guys got to define that. Does he mean God is all things that are physical or all things that are not physical? Because if God is all things physical, what about the non-physical? God is all things non-physical. What is the physical? If he said God is everything, which is what I'm assuming he believes, but no, we don't know, because nobody ever challenges these guys. These guys can say what they want. We don't know what brand of pantheism or what brand of God is everything is he referring to. And saying God is everything it's actually describing God, which is what the guy's original question was. But it's making the idea, the concept of God meaningless. Because if God is everything, God is effectively nothing. So you're still on mute, just so you know. So yeah. Is God my cup in his belief system? Is God fecal matter? Is God math?
Yeah, or even it's God contradictions, really.
Is God contradictions?
This is great. Yeah, man, that's a bold state. Because that kind of stuff, it's not only you have to question that, it leads to, you see this going on with guys like I forgot his name, the Dr. Derek Bell. He was Barack Obama and Michelle Obama's law professor. Where if you look deeper into these guys' ideologies, they are nihilistic to a certain degree. And this type of thinking with the pantheism, how you say it again?
P-A-N?
Yeah, pantheism. It can lead to that epistemic nihilism. That's what it could lead to. So
well, it definitely can lead to that, and the clear line to that, so everybody can follow it linearly, is if everything is God, including good and evil, then there's no moral high ground. There's no righter way to do things. There's no better. There's no worse. There's no good. There's no evil. It's all God. So the most sadistic, mean-spirited things that have happened throughout history, I'll let your minds conjure it up. We can just use slavery, which is what he seems to hate so much and despise so much, which we all do, especially our community. That's God too, according to what he's saying. Slavery was God. Abolitionists were God. Slavers were God. Slavery is God. Freedom is God. That puts them all on the same playing field then. There's no one better than the other. So nobody's really playing these thoughts out to a logical conclusion. And for those of you who want to hear, this is called reductio ad absurdum. Reductio ad absurdum is when you take a certain philosophy or ideal somebody has and you reduce it to its absurdity. You say, okay, if you're saying this, then you got to think about, then you're really saying this over here. If you're saying that God is everything and God is God, there's no better part of God or worse part of God, because that's just God, then the worst things you can think of is God and the best thing. So there's none of them is better than the other. We shouldn't strive for that more than the other. Being strong is not better than being weak. Being smart is not better than being dumb. being good is not better than being bad because it's all God. Now, do you think David Banner really lives his life that way, Enos? Of course not.
Not at all.
So these guys, I go back to the Albert Einstein quote that you and I talk about all the time, Enos, where he talks about scientists and he says that the problem with us scientists is we're such poor philosophers. A lot of our activists and pseudo-intellectuals within our community that we try our best out there, y'all, to police and to analyze and break down, provide commentary for, they're very poor philosophers. One of my favorite quotes is by Dr. William Lane Craig, and he says, the job of the philosopher is to discover the assumptions and commonly held beliefs. This God is everything, y'all, sounds so good, because God is a big concept and a big idea. And the only thing that can be maybe as big as the God concept is everything, right? So I can see how the mind would try to grapple with that and try to reconcile the two. But the Bible's message, the Abrahamic faith message, is God is distinct from everything else. God always existed. Everything else came into existence.
Yeah.
That distinction is how we have modern science. That distinction is how we're able to differentiate between good and evil, right and wrong, strong and weak, smart and dumb, old and new. You know what I'm saying? So we got to think about those concepts when these guys are saying these kind of things. We need these guys to be being vetted. This reminds me of when Andrew Schultz was debating Tariq Nasheed. And one of the things he said is, I think the part of the problem with you, Tariq Nasheed, and you're a very talented guy, is you don't have any competition. David Banner needs competition.
I want to add to what you said as far as that type of ideology, because it definitely blurs the distinction, like you said, between the knower and the known. It blurs it like it's all one. The knower, what I mean, us that seeking understanding who God is, versus the known. The known is God. So
the thing is that in their system of God is all things, God is the known and the unknown. So the more you know, you don't know more, because what you don't know and what you know is all God. You're not getting any better. You're not getting any more knowledgeable, because it's all God. So the thing is, there is no systems that you can develop out of that, because it's all encompassing. It's all God.
And the system, and that's why when he said the religion is for the weak, the religion is a system, it's a framework. It's a framework you can go off of and where you can build things off of. You see the scientific revolution that happened in the West, the foundation, the framework was from, the Bible. I also want to bring this up to you, Vulcan. I see a lot of our activists, especially in the past, they are trained historians. Even when I got the genetic annihilation that came from Dr. Frances, but she was a well-known psychiatrist. What are some things we should consider, or my question to you is, why should we consider getting more into understanding philosophy, our culture? Why should we try to go more in that direction than versus the historian and psychiatrist?
Well, I wouldn't put them as verses, because I don't, but I guess if I were to explain the connection and why I may give philosophy a heavier weight than I would history and other soft sciences, because one of the four branches of philosophy, you have logic and you have epistemology in there. Epistemology is the science of how we know what we know. So every branch of science, soft or hard sciences, the basis of it is the epistemology part of it. How do we know that we know this? Whether if you're talking to a historian, they have a process. If you're talking to a biologist, they have a process. All of them have a process. And so epistemology is the study of those processes. How do they get us closer to truth? How do we know what truth is in that respective discipline? So I would say that the benefit of learning at least the foundations of logic. Do you know the 3 laws of logic out there, all the books out there? Some maybe even would say 4 laws. The law of identity, the law of excluded middle, the law of contradiction, and then some would throw in there the transitive property. You learned it in math class. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. A lot of that stuff might sound high ivory tower information, but it has real implications in the real world. I'm not going to go on all that stuff now. You can definitely look it up. But my point is, I think that having a fundamental understanding, a foundational understanding of fallacies, what they are, why they're important, how they help you in this world, having a firm understanding of the fundamental laws of logic, that helps you to reason better, helps you to think critically. One of the things that and I have gone over the years, you mind a little bit sharing about how it's impacted you, to whatever extent it's impacted you?
Yeah. It's definitely the fundamentals of logic and being aware and able to recognize faulty reason or people using fallacious arguments, logical fallacies, how it helped me. It's easier to follow. Well, I start off by saying this. No, go ahead. You can finish. I'm thinking about my answer on that one.
Yeah. So one of the things for a lot of us is whenever it comes to understanding those things, now I'm more empowered as an individual to be able to process things more efficiently and more effectively.
Okay. Yeah.
So now when I'm hearing somebody say something and they're very eloquent and they know how to share things in a way that's very resolved and convincing, very compelling, I'm going to listen to them like, dang, that makes a lot of sense. And it may even play the things that I already want to believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do I filter out my biases? Confirmation bias, reference group bias, negative bias. These are all things that we deal with. I was reading an article a couple of days ago that was talking about ladies may be predisposed to experiencing more negative thoughts and negative feelings and making negative assumptions as a defense mechanism. Because when the world was a much more cruel, simpler place, it was better to assume the worst for protection than not. Those little things. So us understanding our biases going into things. If I would prefer a certain outcome, you see this all the time. People dealing with real estate. One of the rules of real estate they always say is don't fall in love with the property, because they know if you fall in love with the property before the deal's done, you may make certain sacrifices and compromises that are going to be disadvantageous to you getting the return you want on that investment. So they say, hey, look, don't let your biases influence your financial decision here. Go with the numbers. Go what makes the most sense. And so weeding those things out. So philosophy is helpful because in history, in biology, in mathematics, mathematics I would say is kind of similar to the logic thing again. But in those are different sides of the same coin. But whenever you're looking at those things, they're using the epistemologies. The scientists were originally called natural philosophers. That's what they were called, natural philosophers, early scientists, because it gives you a foundation on how to think properly about things, how to reason through things. I read a lot of scientific literature. I read a lot of scientists that dabble in the religion and dabble in the philosophy. And one of the main critiques you'll see from atheists who are philosophers, when they critique atheists who are not philosophers, they talk about how poor their arguments are, because this scientist, astrophysicist, or this evolutionary biologist may be very well trained in their discipline and may do great work and show a tremendous amount of acumen. But when they try to reconcile ideas and to step outside of their skill set, they start to make conclusions and they start to deduce certain things and people looking at it like, that doesn't follow. That conclusion doesn't follow from those premises. And so you start to realize, like, wow, they're out of their depth a little bit. And that all that means they need to sharpen up their philosophical skills. You have scientific philosophers who try to meld the two. But you'll see that no matter what, whether it's scientists or whoever else, if they haven't been trained in a lot of those things or done the training themselves, they may have difficulty with thinking critically through things. They can't weed out their biases, things of that nature. They don't know what epistemology to use to solve what problem. So they start asking bad questions. Can science, somebody might be like, can science prove God? Well, it's like, well, science is the study of the natural world. God is not a natural entity. So science was never developed or created, discovered, however you want to say it, to discover God. So it's not going to happen. That's a category error.
Yeah. And I want to add what you asked me earlier too, as far as what are some of the things I learned over the years. You touched on as far as the confirmation bias, but you know, one of the root of understanding epistemology is really being in control of your cognitive abilities, right? Because we all have biases, right? But the goal is to be able to be aware of them and control them. And you see a lot of racial tension that's been going on the last, I mean, it's been going on since this country has been founded, but during the social media era in the last 10 years, you see a lot of us been emotionally charged and been a part of this groupthink. And and that's the benefit of relying on this critical thinking framework. Because now when you hear people like David Banner who project or these premises, now you're alert looking, okay, how he's gonna connect this with the conclusion. You're more focused and you know what to look for, what's coherent or what's logical or what's a valid argument. And
Yeah,
that's what I notice more
and,
often.
you know, a question to ask. You know,
Yeah,
that quote that we cite often, which is
judge a man by his questions and not his answers.
Yeah, rather than his answers, absolutely. And then the French moralist quote about it is better to debate an issue without settling it than to settle an issue without debating it. So we can continue in the video. We covered quite a bit.
And I just want to say one of my favorite bars when I forgot his name, but he said he's not fear of being shot by a cop. He's more in fear that a mob brainwashing his mind. That was very powerful. I think we all could learn from that. But yeah, let's get back into it. Let the videos pop. Oh, there you go. You skip. There we go.
Definitely, the devil doesn't fucking exist.
That was pretty.
It's the balance.
Wow.
See, I'm gonna tell you what the God concept is not what bothers me. It's the concept of the devil. The devil doesn't fucking exist.
That was you think that was made up for control?
It's definitely
because
what keeps you away from God is fear and doubt. And peep this: if God is infinite, right? We, regardless of what religion you believe in, God is the top, right? If you were the top, would you create anything to rival you?
Makes no sense.
It doesn't fucking make sense.
A lot of religion doesn't make sense, though. No disrespect to anybody.
And the part that does it, I'm not saying that all religion is not a place for it, but think about this, bro. Like, why would any one thing have the lock on infinite knowledge? Things are as they were, as they will be. Why would they be a New Testament? God is what he was and will forever be. Like, dude, and then the thing that I don't understand about black people is these are the same people that enslaved you. That's the same symbols that enslaved you. And I'm not just talking about Christianity. There's another religion that black people really believe in that started slavery. So in me saying that, like, bro, like, these are the same people that have forever lied to you. They didn't want you on earth. Why would they give you the key to heaven? They didn't want you on fucking earth. And that's the reason why I don't worry about my...
Yeah, so going into what he talked about, I'll try to write it down here. So he said the devil doesn't exist. Again, that's a theological concept here. You know, I'm not going to sit here and be able to prove to people that the devil does or doesn't exist. I think what's more important to note is why he's saying this. And I think, again, this is what I mentioned earlier about people like David Banner, is they are attacking pop culture Christianity. You know, I think Flip Wilson, the black comedian, had, you know, got the red suit on with the pitchfork and all that kind of stuff. That's people's depictions of the devil for most of us in our society, in our culture. But in the Bible, you know, Satan's not a rival of God, and Satan had to, when God would call upon him, he had to show up like everybody else. And so when he's saying that, you know, Satan doesn't exist because of something, anything like that, that's just ridiculous. You know, how was Satan created for control? He doesn't tell us. Nobody asked that question. I know when we get into it, like Zoe Williams would talk about the light bearer and, you know, we're seeking knowledge and stuff like that. But David Banner hasn't said any of that stuff. So I don't know why he's saying that Satan is there for control. You know, is he talking if he's doing like a modern critique on how a lot of religious groups and sects use the devil as an excuse or something like that, then there could be some truth to that. I think there's a lot of overuse and exaggerated impact in that way in the church. So I might find some parts of agreement with that, but he hasn't stated it. Nobody's questions. He gets to get on his bully pulpit and share his gospel, and we all have to sit there and take it because nobody's going to ask him any questions. That to me is the saddest part of all these things. Everybody who's done breakdowns on us like that, especially within the Black community. I see a lot of these white intellectuals, whether it's even Alex Jones, when he went on Joe Rogan, I wouldn't consider him necessarily an intellectual, but he's no dummy by any stretch of the imagination. But at least he had to go on Joe Rogan's show, all these different shows. People challenge this guy for all of his beliefs, whether it's the Columbine takes he has or his views on water and fluoride and Behemoth Grove or whatever, Bohemian Grove, all that kind of stuff. People are challenging him and making him have to really dig deep into his mental resources, mental faculties to try to prove some of this stuff. A lot of our Black intellectuals don't go through that. Now we got some that have been on the big platforms, and I won't name them all right now, but there's a few of them that have done that. Marcus Lamont Hill, I'll say that, I'll consider him a Black intellectual. He's been on the big stage on Fox, on CNN, and Joe Budden podcast. He's done it on the big stage, the small stages, the medium stages. And I respect that, whether I agree with his beliefs or not. Michael Rick Dyson, Cornel West, a lot of people out there that I would say, hey, these guys on the big platforms, and they do a lot of Black conservatives. You see that kind of stuff as well. They don't mind debating and stuff like that. Although I've heard from some people that even they don't like to get into some debates. I don't know. But what I gotta say about a lot of our musicians and creatives, that they speak with so much conviction, even more so than the Black intellectuals. It's like you never see them having to get their ideas challenged. So the devil doesn't exist. And then he says, fear and doubt keep us from God. The Bible says sin separates us from God. So that's a part of theological contention right there. And to me, this whole fear and doubt, that's this whole self-help, I'm God, I got to look within to be strong, all that kind of rolled into one. Because fear and doubt basically saying if you fear and doubt, you don't have a lot of confidence in yourself, and if you only realize how powerful and strong you really were, you'd be close to God. So basically the highest part of the zenith of a human's identity or existence is becoming God themselves on some kind of level, which is terrible. So you see here with this guy, it's about fear and doubt keep us from God. Fear and doubt of what? The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. So then you have it again. You have it being said here, this guy is just saying anything. And remember, this is the same guy who said you can't define God. Then he goes on this long soliloquy about God. But you continue.
All right. The video was. Can you hear it?
I don't hear anything. The same video? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Now it's up. Now it's not.
There's another religion that Black people really believe in that started slavery.
Yeah,
So in me saying that, like, bro, like these are the same people that have forever lied to you, that didn't want you on earth. Why would they give you the key to heaven? They didn't want you on fucking earth.
Okay, you can pause it real quick. And again, this guy's allowed to say whatever he wants. Now, I think he's referring to Islam. And he's saying another religion that Black people love, they started slavery. Now, for any armchair historians, any quick Google search will teach you that Islam did not start slavery. Now, Arab slave trade was pretty brutal. Where 20 million Africans castrated, murdered, all kind of stuff was going on with that. But they didn't start slavery, not even by a long shot. But again, it sounds good to the ear. And people will want to hear these kind of things. Anytime you say slavery in front of Black people and white liberals, they get riled up. And so that's what he's playing on. Don't let him play on your emotions like that, y'all. Don't let him do that. We can continue.
These are the same people. I'm like that.
Oh yeah, I guess I'll address the same. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I guess I'll address the same people thing that he keeps on lamenting. it's not the same people. You got people that live today. You got people that lived during Jim Crow. You got people that lived during slavery. You got those people that came over here from England, and their families being from all different kind of places in Europe that convulged at some point in time due to conquest and all kind of other stuff, famines and plagues and all kind of stuff. So again, he's mixing up his tenses. I want y'all to hear that. Hear with your intellectual ear, y'all. Hear with a sound mind. He's mixing up tenses, talking about they gave you this and trying to control that, but he's not talking about people that you actually ever met in your life, people that have any viable impact on your life today. He's talking people that happened, that people 200, 300, 400 years ago, and saying they gave you this and gave you that. What is anybody going to ask him to prove any of this stuff? We go and go.
Worry about my records, dog. Like, why would I expect the system to support the shit I'm talking about? That doesn't make
used to be when hip hop was in the early stages, they would support
because we controlled it.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Hip hop sold into commercialism.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely correct.
But I will say this because I see a lot of people filming. Keep this part. But
what are you filming this for?
This is for me.
But this is the people. People always blame it on rappers. See, black people don't buy records anymore. The system, like motherfuckers be getting their albums bought by companies. So why the fuck would a motherfucker support the people when the people don't support the artists anymore? You gotta spend money.
Exactly.
White folks run this shit. Literally. Them
What do you think?
motherfuckers still they buying white folks.
I want to save this shit for the radio, but I was gonna say, what do you think of some of the people such as Pac and people
go ahead, pause it.
Going against the system?
So the reality is this: whether it's owned by whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, every business' whole goal is to make money and to find out how to make as much money as they can, the quickest they can, the longest they can. So changing the color, I know we talked about before how I think Irv Gotti and Suge Knight and a few of them were planning on starting their own record labels or finding their own way of mass producing and distributing certain things. It wouldn't have been any better. When you hear some of the stories of some of these black CEOs, they're known for doing some of the most heinous acts against blacks, black men and black women. Now, I'm not saying they're worse than white men or worse than Asian, excuse me, not genetically, maybe culturally. I don't know. So that's a debatable topic. And so my point with all this, when it comes to what this guy is saying is, one, okay, we get it. Y'all got to recognize this conflict of interest. He's trying to give us these nuggets of wisdom for the world, but he's an artist and he wants us to buy his stuff. So there's a conflict of interest a little bit. Are you saying this because you have a stake in the game? Are you saying this because if we, eat what you're serving us right now, you'll eat a whole lot more? And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you listen to the kind of music these guys are producing, specifically David Banner's producing, that's not something that's beneficial for the black community anyway. So you talk about white owned and all this kind of stuff. Whoever owns it, whoever's pumping this stuff, it's no bueno. It's no good. The artist that did it, whoever's a part of that stuff, is no good. So whenever people are saying these kind of things, it's white owned and it's black owned. If we're just talking about just crass materialism and just who owns what, then if you care about that kind of a thing and you rather that whoever's disseminating the poison to your community look just like you, then that to me is a problem. But I can see why you may go that route with it. But generally, no matter who's pushing this stuff or who's reaping the major benefits from it financially, we lose. All of us regular people are the ones that's going to lose. So I think that when you listen to people like this, you got to recognize, you got to be able to weed through all the phrases that we love to hear and the trigger words that make us get emotionally invested in what they're saying and amped up. None of this is good. Anything else he said that you thought about? There's some things he mentioned that I don't really recall off the top of my head, but
yeah, but this is a good thing. Like just to give my 2 cents when you said that us regular people lose. Yeah, the people that are putting the music out, the David Banners and the black CEOs, they do win. It creates that elitism, that the talented temp. The people in the talented temp benefit more than the regular black folks out here. And you see, that's what's
Yeah.
illustrated here.
You get to see him talking about doing songs like Just Like a Pimp.
Yeah.
You know, and so you got people out here thinking that being a pimp is really a cool thing to do, but really cool thing to be.
Yeah, he will argue like he doesn't do that kind of music anymore. I think his last few albums be more conscious, he would say. And people would ask, I see in older interviews, they was like, he said he always has been conscious. It's just that when he was younger, he was broke. I thought that was very telling. So,
well, yeah, that just means you a sellout. You sell out your own people to get $1.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, if he's recanted his messages from the past, then I shouldn't bring him up anymore. If he's gonna say that, hey, look, you know what, whatever, I used to formally, communicate and things that I would pedestalize and herald and esteem highly and reverence to people and share, then if he's gonna say, yeah, that stuff was wrong, that stuff was filthy, and I was hurting people, then I wouldn't bring it up no more if I knew he was aware. Maybe he's done that. If anybody in the audience knows he's done that, then hey, let me know. But to my knowledge, when he goes on Sway and Drink Champs, he still speaks very highly of his career and thinks really highly of what he did.
Still performing.
And doesn't regret it anyway, still performs those things as a 50-year-old man. So as long as that's the case, then I can talk about it. I can bring it up. That's an issue.
So are you saying, what does that say? If he's for the people, he still advocate or still promote his older music, is that something we should take note of?
I mean, I think part of it is people that are interviewing these guys need to ask these kind of questions. Hey, do you endorse pimping in our communities? Is that something that you endorse? Should the youth embrace your message there? That's how I word it. Remember Cameron was on the Bill O'Reilly show and he says, pimping and bees.
Yeah. Purple haze.
Purple haze. We should be doing those kind of things with these guys. For good music they make and for bad music they make. For moral music and for immoral music. Godly music and ungodly music. Question need to come.
A shout out to Nothing Without Jesus says, racism comes from both sides and a lot of it from both sides. He can only experience it from one side, so maybe it's why he feels the way about it. Any thoughts on that?
It definitely could come from both sides. But I don't think he's probably saying that because he can only experience it from one side, so maybe it's why he feels that way about it. I think we feel this way because it feels good to the flesh. It feels good to have a villain, to hate somebody else, to think that the reason why you're not as successful as what you have. Obviously, a lot of artists want control of their masters and want control over production and dissemination of the material. And if anybody else had that, right, they're not going to like it. There's black artists who have had black producers or black managers or black whatever that hated them because they wouldn't give their music back. You see that with Cam and P. Diddy. A lot of guys with the P. Diddy stuff, they didn't like that stuff with them. And he was black.
Yeah.
So if he's white and he's doing it, you got all the more reason to not to like him. But it ain't because some prejudice or some oppression you face. It's because you don't like the fact that he has power and you don't in that way. So that's we all want to have more power. We want less people to be in control of what we got going on. We control people's fates. So, these artists, they complain about the artists that sign them. The artists that sign them complain about them. So you see people complaining about different artists, and then the artists complain about them too. Never ending cycle.
Yeah. I read this connected to it.
Do you think that the system actually killed him, or you think that was really due to the street?
I should save this for the radio. I'll come back. The truth is just the truth. It will be and will forever be.
Yeah.
It's a conglomerate effort of both. See, what a lot of people don't understand is that the ghetto was an experiment that was ran on Jewish people by the Nazis. That's why I trip on America. They even called it the ghetto. It was literally an experiment called the ghetto. So if you put any animal in a small area, a bunch of them with limited resources, they are going to kill each other. That's scientifically proven. So for me, some of the shit was a plan, but dude, think about it. Historically, if one slave would escape from the plantation, do you know what they would do to the whole plantation?
Chastise the whole.
Not chastise, beat them all nearly to death.
Right.
So the reason why we have haters in the hood is because we were programmed to be that way. So let me tell you this, I'm serious.
Wow.
This is a theory that I talk about in my lectures. Would y'all agree that the human brain, the central processing unit of a computer was based off the human brain?
Of course.
Okay.
Right.
Do we agree with that?
Yes.
So watch this. If you erased a CPU, right?
Right.
And uploaded a virus, would you blame the computer or the fucking programmer when the computer started going crazy?
It's the programmer.
The fucking programmer.
We gave it a command.
We have been programmed to act the fucking way that we act.
Super real shit right now.
So they don't necessarily have to kill Pop. You don't necessarily have to kill Malcolm. We'll do it because we were programmed to fucking do it. That's the reason why I tell you can't blame black people.
Right.
We were being programmed for over 350 years, and they didn't even take 1 month to reinstill what we lost. Dude, they used to come and praise in Timbuktu and in Egypt. We created math, science, and mathematics. Dude, this shit is so fucking crazy. Black people have been fucking programmed. And the crazy thing, if I was in Mississippi.
Why?
Cause, bruh, anywhere we from, bruh, that's the people that hate you the most. You from the block, fuck you. I didn't make it, nigga, fuck you.
Yep.
That's a programming. So I don't hate my people for hating me. They supposed to hate me.
Wow.
I am an enemy to the system. So the difference between me, I know it. So regardless of how positive and how conscious I am, I keep 2 pistols with me at all fucking time, and I'll blow that bitch. I love my.
You go ahead and pause it.
Or my friend told me.
So yeah, I mean, let's cover a few things that he's brought up. This goes to the fundamental difference, and this is why it's so important to understand when you're listening to somebody with their foundation as their basis, philosophically, spiritually, whatever it is, because you have here a guy who's saying that the reason people are doing this or doing that, and he has his theories, but for the Bible would prescribe a different reason for it. It would say because the hardness of heart, because it's sin, because the flesh loves to do evil things, and that's what we do, and no one is good. So the reality is that the reason why this stuff has happened is, you're saying that we kill each other in the ghettos and nature and its basic biology and stuff like that. There's some truth to those kind of things. All those things are contributing factors. They did it with rats and all kind of different experiments and stuff like that. But ultimately, there's small groups that don't do that in the human family. There's small little Asian communities here and other communities there. Some have to deal with gang violence. Some don't have to deal with gang violence. There's historical context you can look at where some people groups were considered to be very highly moral groups and stuff like that. So even if they were in a small group, they still didn't do those things to each other. A lot of it has to do with the evil in our hearts. So that's why that stuff's happening. So he gave a historical fact about, the ghettos and experiments over there in Germany. And said that's what we have now and stuff like that. But he admits it's his theory. That's fine. And for everybody out there hearing that it's his theory, then okay, then you can do your own research and you can discover if there's a direct correlation between the ghettos in Germany and then the ghettos we have here in the Americas. And what's that connection? Is that something that's because that's what happens when people have to occupy a small space because where else they're going to go? They got to go where there's houses being built to their houses. You got white flight, you got, red line, you got all these things that are happening. You got people being put in certain areas. Was that like some concerted effort by this unnamed entity to put them all in a small group and have them killing each other? Or was that just kind of de facto what happens when you have people that got to find a place to stay and they all have to go in the same spot because of discrimination? Those are things you got to figure out for yourself. Is it de facto? Was this a concerted effort by, and probably a little bit of mixture of both at some points. But my point is just saying that when he's making it seem like his historical fact justifies everything he says of the historical fact, if it is true, that's where it comes from here in America. That doesn't mean everything he said after that was accurate. So you got to be able to eat the meat without the bones. You got something you want to say,
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. So how essential or important it is to have a religious foundation when you want to come up with theories when you formulate your theories to help solve social behavior issues or social interaction issues, Why is that important to have a religious or spiritual foundation, or organized religion? I'll say that organized religion. Foundation.
I don't know that it's necessarily important to be able to solve, depending upon the problem. I think it just depends on what the problem you're trying to solve. I think that ultimately you got to have some type of foundation to do really anything, because you got to have a meaning for why you're doing anything. Why do you get up out of bed? You know, why do you, I remember I was sharing with a friend of mine who was really big into, I'll consider like, you know, Black militants and wanted to address the atrocities that have happened to African Americans on this continent. And one thing that I asked him, I said, how do you know that justice is a real thing? And why do you care about it? And I think I don't think he had been really asked that question before. And I think it was maybe hard for him to really process in that moment. But I think over time, as he chewed on it, it made more sense. But if somebody's going to try to do any kind of good for humanity and solve some of the social ills, there's obviously financial incentive for some things. If you invent something that helps people, you make a lot of money, you get to live a good life on this earth. But I think outside of the monetary gains, if you're going to do those kind of things, why are you doing it? Do you believe in good? Do you believe that's really bad? Do you want to ease suffering on this earth? Why? You must believe in good. Good is not something that you're going to find in a test tube, or bad. Excuse me. Those are all intangible concepts, right? Concepts are intangible. Those are all intangible things, you know, axioms about life that we have that you can't really prove. And so the general idea is that what they call the divine command theory, you know, and the idea is that good comes from God. Good is what God says is good. And so for those who are believers in organized religions, it's easy for them to justify why they should desire and seek out the good, because it comes from God. But people that don't have that foundation or haven't developed that foundation for themselves, you see this with David Hume in his writings with his daughter about, you know, she might try to correct her behavior and say, hey, you shouldn't do that. She's like, but why? And he didn't have a real good reason why. You know, there is no hierarchy of values when it comes to those kind of things. It's all the same. It's all meaningless. I remember one scientist, I can't remember who the name was, he goes, morality is an aid for reproduction, and any deeper meaning is illusory, is an illusion. It's not real. There is no real morality. There's no real good and evil. So I would say this: if you have that mindset to do good because it's a real thing, where does that come from? And you can have the mindset without getting into where it comes from, but it came from somewhere. That's not something that's always existed in every part of the world. People have different views. Something happened for you to come to that type of view, for you to be aware that it even exists. For most of us, it's Judeo-Christian values. Believing that all human beings are made in the image of God and have intrinsic value and worth. That's where that comes from. But you don't need to have that to do good. You don't need that, you know, to do good in the world. You don't need to even have that to understand the importance of good. But to understand the foundation of it, to know that it's real, that requires a more rigid spiritual structure, which you're going to find in organized religion, specifically, say Christianity, but the Abrahamic faiths in general.
And that's why I asked you that, because when I forgot what he said, and you said your reasons because the flesh is desire those things, and I was like, he was able to point back to something. He was more referencing historical accounts why he was coming up with his answer. So yeah, that's why I asked that question. Excuse me. All right, finish this out.
I mean, this you may have heard of him, bro. But my homie told me, he said, "Listen, bro," and it changed my whole fucking life. He said, Malcolm and Martin failed. I'm like, dog, fuck you talking about? He said, if you don't live to complete what you set out to do, there's only been one black revolutionary that actually did their job, and it was Harriet Tubman.
because she fucking lived. If you die before you do what you do, Pac did not have kids. He fucking failed. Pac is done. He didn't finish. Biggie failed. He died. If you die before you complete your task and the reason why you were put on this earth, you fucking fail. And I'm not letting nobody take me out. If they take me, I tell everybody know this about me. If they get me,
right,
y'all gonna know it was about 10 shots fired back.
This was about to be the greatest interview of radio ever had.
Yes.
No. It wouldn't have been this though. Let me tell you this. I'm serious, and I'm not just making, because motherfuckers make excuses for the way shit happens for a reason. Dog, now we have set the tone for what the next interview is going to be. It wouldn't have been that shit if we would have been on time. We would have been in here happy to see each other, freestyling and laughing and playing.
Music, right.
Shit happened like this, and I need you to tell the big man that tomorrow so he won't be pissed that we were being late. But nah, bro. Like now, motherfuckers is going to be waiting on this, dog. You going to know the questions to fucking ask.
Hell yeah.
And now that we didn't talk, you're going to be looking. Because I tell people, I don't want to change nobody's mind. You just want to set markers. I tell people that all the time, I don't give a fuck what you think about me. Just think. Most of us don't fucking think.
Everybody's running on control.
Yeah. Fuck what you think about me. Just think.
Just fucking think. I don't give a fuck. Because the truth is, bro, what kind of asshole would I be to think I know every fucking thing? Last year, if you were an infinite studier and you study like I study, you are going to contradict yourself. Because you're learning something new every fucking day. So for me to sit here and tell you that my way is the way, that's why I don't tell nobody my religion. I don't tell nobody what I believe. I just state fucking facts. Deal with the fucking facts. Because everybody want to get all spiritual and all black folks want to talk about is fucking hope. Fuck your hope. Obama lied to black folks. But the way he didn't lie, because all he ever promised was fucking hope. And he's not done one motherfucking thing for African-American people, but fucking get their hopes up and break their fucking spirit.
That's right.
That's it.
Matrix, man.
Anything else, you can write down. You can write down what he's done for any other cross-section of people. With black folks, we always say, I was just so hopeful to see a new black president, and he gave me hope. Other people, you can write down, I don't want your fucking hope. Always remember this until the day that you die. When a fucking architect builds a building, does he hope that the building is gonna go up? You wanna know why? Because he has a fucking plan.
And it gets done.
And it gets fucking done. Ain't no fucking hope. I don't want your fucking, give me my motherfucking money.
That's always been here.
So yeah, I mean, if I could just, the part that stood out to me the most was I don't try to change people's minds. I don't talk about my religion, all that kind of stuff. I mean, maybe that's true that he doesn't do it because he doesn't want to change people's minds or convince people of certain things. But my sneaking suspicion is you don't do it because you haven't figured it out yourself. You don't have a set belief system religiously. It's all over the place. Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, all those different beliefs have been debated and discussed and written about and critiqued since their inception. So now you're in a situation where you have this guy, it's just not just him, but a lot of these guys in our culture and movements, they have these beliefs that they pick and choose when they want to believe it. Does his belief system allow him to treat women, to be a pimp to women? Like these guys don't share their belief systems because we can't even hold them accountable. Then they want to talk bad about pastors and priests and moms, whatever they call the Muslim teachers and stuff like that. They want to talk bad about them, but it's easy to do it because we know their beliefs. We know when they're being consistent or inconsistent with what they proclaim. A lot of these guys, they keep it to themselves because we don't know how to, so when they want to go on Drink Champs, they can yuck it up and talk about all the kind of criminal activity and underhanded, nasty, despicable things, and then go in front of people at a university and claim the moral high ground and virtue signal and talk about how amazing they are and how strong their integrity and virtues are. They can live in both worlds and make money off both things. No, tell us what you believe, where you stand, so we can hold you accountable, just like you would hold Creflo Dollar accountable or Joel Osteen accountable or Eddie Long accountable. These are people that we see on TV, people idolize, unfortunately. They get held accountable to their own belief system. Nobody was judging Hugh Hefner because Hugh Hefner wasn't claiming to be a priest or somebody like that.
Activist.
Activist. But Eddie Long, they gonna judge. Creflo Dollar, they're gonna judge. Fred Price, they're gonna judge. And I'm not saying we shouldn't judge those guys either. I'm just saying that they were at least bold enough and man enough to put their beliefs on Front Street. Say, this is what I believe, this is what I hold to.
Wow.
But you got guys like David Banner who can dwell in relative anonymity because we don't know what he believes, what to hold him to. I mean, we don't do it, hold a lot of people to normal morality, that pimping and talking about, acts of violence against your own people for nefarious reasons. We should say that stuff's not good. You're a bad person. Or you need to repent. You need to change your mind. You need to be somebody different. You need to stop doing that. We let them slide. That's all they knew. They're just trying to make a buck. That's what we say. So part of that, keeping religion to yourself, I mean, maybe part of it is because they don't want to push it on somebody else or convince somebody else anything else. But whenever you're espousing your belief system and saying, always remember this, that's you pushing your beliefs on. Always remember this. It's like these guys, and so then he's smart because he makes room for the fact he's going to contradict themselves. You can't have them accountable. As long as I've learned I'm always going to contradict myself. Do you recant those contradictions? You say, hey, look, I said this earlier and I was wrong. Now I believe this.
And that's the beauty, and that's what we were saying earlier as far as the purpose of epistemology and critical thinking is like looking at math. Yeah, you're learning new things, but you can always go back to math, and 2 + 2 will always be 4. It's the same thing with these tools you use to observe the world and judge the world. So you're not going to contradict yourself. I mean, your thoughts, but the template will help you find those contradictions.
Yeah, and if you're still searching, maybe you shouldn't share certain things. In the Bible, it says the teacher will undergo a stricter judgment. Maybe you should reserve certain ideas for yourself until you can come to a definite conclusion on it, so you don't have to contradict yourself so much. Because what he doesn't go into, and what people don't really realize all the time, is that there are casualties of these intellectual wars and these spiritual wars. When you say certain things, you get people riled up emotionally based off the sophistry that you're expounded on, and then they go out and have certain beliefs and denounce certain things and certain people and raise all kinds of ruckus about certain things. You go, hey, no, I was wrong about that. The destruction's already done. So this is not like a victimless act to just, I'm gonna contradict myself because I keep on learning. Stop being so haphazard in what you share until you got it figured out. Not all knowledge is gonna be an endless quest to verify. 2 + 2 is 4. I'm not gonna come back 5 years later and say 2 + 2 is actually 5. Either the sun's a ball of gas or it's not. There's some things that we say that you shouldn't have to go back on 5-10 years from now if you did your due diligence in the beginning. Now there are things that we're gonna change. I mentioned earlier about certain archaeological things and things like that. They discover one thing, they bury something else. They thought something was a planet and it wasn't a planet. All that stuff's gonna happen. But a lot of these core spiritual beliefs, and that's the problem with a lot of these disorganized religion, spiritual people and disorganized religion people, is that because their foundational beliefs are so all over the place and they're really undefined, because the religions that they tend to subscribe to are not written down anywhere. It's a non-primary source here and some he said, she said over there, and they're trying to put all that stuff together and extrapolate some kind of moral code and spiritual code out of that. What ends up happening is they don't have much. And it gives them that freedom, kind of a godlike freedom to do what they will and say what they want. And then they hold it over all of our heads and look how liberated I am. Y'all are stuck in y'all's rigid religions and I'm free, I'm liberated. But they can't even explain what they believe in, how they gonna liberate whatever. If your religious belief is so liberating and it transcends the feeble, archaic belief systems that we have today, why wouldn't you share it? You won't tell us.
Yeah.
And they do that on purpose because they know they don't have anything behind the curtains. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Remember when they discovered the wizard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was all a farce. So I think audience out there, we got to keep that in mind. That's the purpose of the Vulcan soapbox. We're breaking things down. It's not an attack on him in any kind of way. All of us grew up on his music. I've heard some of his lectures and have been inspired by some of the concepts that he's elucidated. But at the end of the day, we got to be able to, like I said, eat the meat, spit out the bone. We got to know the sophistry versus the sound reasoning. Be a Vulcan. Think about it logically. You got anything else?
That's it. Just tune in. That was the last video. Just be sure to tune in. Please subscribe.
Oh, hold
Like
on,
the
hold on. He
video,
said
please
Martin
share.
and Malcolm failed, and Tupac and Biggie failed. Now, one, Tupac and Biggie, we keep trying to turn these guys into more than what they was. I'm a big Tupac guy and a big Biggie guy historically, just because nostalgically, yeah, that's what I was into. But I mean, those guys were not activists. You know, you can say Tupac being, you know, having Black Panther origins and speaking all that kind of stuff he was doing as a young man in his early 20s. He had two messages. One of them, some of it was good, some of it was bad. You know, he's definitely not to be put in the same, you know, sentence or speech as a Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. Those guys communicated one type of message. They were consistent in that way. Now, they may, whether they live consistently with it at all times or not is a different conversation. But they gave one message, and they stood on it, and they debated it. They went to the public platforms. They went to the universities. They went to the soapboxes of their time, and they communicated those messages and took on all challenges and questions. That's responsible. That's integrity. That's intellectual integrity. That shows that they really stood by. They believe they have the truth. They're willing to defend the truth and explain the truth to others. Biggie got kicked out of his mom's house because he couldn't be an upstanding citizen. Had a good mom. I think she was an educator and stuff like that. Religious, and he got kicked out. He was a troubled, rebellious young kid who was talented as a rhymer. Make no mistake about that. But these guys were given two messages. I was a big fan. What did Biggie say? You know, people look at you like you's the user. So those are all the losers, mad Buddha abusers. They don't know about the stress-filled pain, baby. On the way, mad bills to pay. That's why you drink Tanqueray, so you can reminisce and wish you wasn't living so devilish. See, he knew he was living devilish. The flesh loved the devilish living, and that's what he was living. That's how he was living. That's what it was. Tupac, I ain't guilty because even though I sell rocks, it feels good putting money in the mailbox. On one end, other end is I made a G today, but you made it in a sleazy way. So it cracked to the kids. I got to get paid. But hey, that's the way it is. So you got a guy who's giving two messages. Where's the integrity in that? Where's the integrity what Biggie's talking about? He's admitting he's living devilish. So don't put them in the same category as Martin and Malcolm. That's just, we got to separate them. If we can't get that right, y'all, we're out of there. And definitely none of these are God. All these are fallible men, and they're the same when you in comparison to Jesus. So the distinction between them characters becomes virtually insignificant, negligible once you compare them to Jesus, who's God in the flesh. So my point in saying all that is, you know, when he's saying they failed, they didn't fail just because somebody passed away. They were martyrs for the cause. Some could even argue their impact was much greater because they passed away. The message lived on. I mean, Martin Luther King said he knew he wasn't gonna probably make it to the mountaintop as he's hearkening back to and referencing Moses. So that's that, and that's what's crazy with a lot. I know the Dr. Umar does this, and he gives a lot of credit to a lot of the patriarchs of the social movements and activist movements. But a lot of these guys, they gotta find their own place in this scheme, so they start tearing down the guys before them. No, they don't have a song like a pimp. They don't do that. You failed, David Banner, so far. It's not too late. You're still alive to redeem yourself, but no, you failed. They didn't fail. You failed. Yeah.
You changed when you got up in age in your 40s. These guys was doing this late teens, 20s.
Yeah. And they only had one message. It wasn't two messages.
Oh,
they wasn't saying in one interview like a pimp, and the next interview saying we got to do for ourselves. It was one message to the public. So yeah, I mean, that's bonkers right there. Why aren't Black people more offended about when these guys make these kind of comments? Why are we more offended by that?
Probably just don't value what the older generation paid for us. Probably don't highly value it.
That's got to be the case because there's no way we get away with saying that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King failed. Only one that didn't fail was Harriet Tubman. So that's supposed to be some kind of pandering to women. That's something I can think of.
Yeah.
What Harriet Tubman did was amazing. We appreciate all her efforts to this day. You know, she's been debated to be on a $20 bill or something like that.
Yeah.
So she's always been in the running to earn even more respect from people and her name living on by being on our currency. But there's no way that you can say those guys failed because what they did impacted all of us in a major way and led to us being able to do what we do today. And some people, you see the Spartans, you see this with the Navy. I was watching Men of Honor with Cuba Gooding Jr., Robert De Niro. They were saying the closest you'll ever be to a hero is passing away under the sea in the waves. You see that with Sparta, they were like, who's going to give me a noble death? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of people's belief systems is to die. Even in the Bible, in the Quran, it's an honor to die for a noble cause.
Yeah,
so he's saying that
beautiful death. That's what.
Yeah, beautiful death. He's talking about you failed because you died before you completed your mission. Part of our mission on this earth, all of our mission is to die. But we'll leave it on that right there.
All right. The last words you want to give to the folks or viewers out there, man.
Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Like, subscribe, share. If you have anything you want us to address, we got our email right there on the screen. Please send in things for us to cover on the show. We want to start doing more videos where we just cover certain personalities that are getting pretty popular. So definitely send those in if you want us to cover a certain person. I tend to deal with the people who frustrate me the most because they tend to have the most sophistry and bank on their charisma and their notoriety instead of actual true acumen and due diligence when it comes to studying and learning and showing the most integrity in what they decide to communicate to the public. So, but we're little to dissect anybody. We'll probably take 5 to 10 clips from the internet, from stuff they talked about, and just start breaking it down and going through it. So definitely let us know. We love to do this, and we'll continue to do this until, I guess if according to David Banner, if we pass it before we finish doing this work, we failed. So hope you've been eating right over there and in the gym doing your push-ups and all that kind of good stuff because we got a lot of work to do.
Yes, you're tuning in to the Vulcan Soapbox, man. Make critical thinking great again. All right, tune in next time. That's hilarious. All right, peace.
I'm here to stand on my soapbox and proclaim that to the world.
On this show.
This is the hottest show on the planet right now.
What's the debate?
Ain't no debate.